It was designed by a group of extraterrestrials who were using it to help monitor and control the human population, which was at the time being run as a very, very severe, dramatically oppressive prison. I'm director of Farsight, and that's the absolute largest venue dealing with the subject of remote viewing. And that was at the time that they had Greek and Roman gods as well as the Egyptian gods. And all those gods were real. They were there. They were extraterrestrials. And what's so interesting about that, it's an example of 3D printing. It was done by an extraterrestrial ship using an energy thing, like a laser type of thing, and they printed it. We call them the good ETs and the bad ETs. The good ETs are the ones that we've been working with. The bad ETs are the ones that the government has been working with. We have real meetings with extraterrestrials, and we've been doing that for years. And they talk telepathically with us, and we translate those into words so that it can be picked up with the cameras. They said, we told you when we were going to start using the smaller ships. We are saying the next step is big ships. The bad ETs have been involved in a huge amount of genetic experiments. We don't use the word solar spirit at Farsight. We use something called ISB. ISB is an immortal spiritual being, and all of us are ISBs. You are an ISB, I'm an ISB, and we happen to be wearing shells or wrappers or containers called bodies. I've had ET contact, direct ET contact my whole life. I've been on the ships many times. I have a daughter on the ships as a hybrid. The bottom line for this planet being a prison planet, it's a slave workforce that's needed for a galactic expansion for the bad ETs that are currently running the place. And that's exactly why the good ETs are here to try to stop.
Yeah, well, cool. Yeah, I'm ready to get going if you are.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, Ryan has no idea what we're in for today because he missed dinner last night. But
Okay.
this has the potential to be one of the coolest, wildest episodes that we've done. I mean,
We'll keep it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the work that you're doing, the research that you're doing is it's fascinating, man. So, how did you get into? Well, first off, I guess just tell the audience a little bit about your background.
Well, I have two hats. I don't wear hats, but I have two hats. And one is I'm a university professor at Emory University, but I do not do anything that we're going to be talking about today at the university. At the university, I teach. I'm a mathematician in a social science program, so I teach nonlinear modeling, statistics, and courses on elections and voting and stuff like that at the university. Outside of the university, independent of the university, I'm director of Farsight, Farsight, and that's the absolute largest venue dealing with the subject of remote viewing anywhere. And we are the only place that has full public projects for remote viewing. And I can absolutely say that we are the not only the largest, but we're also the best of any place that you can find information about with remote viewing. And I can say this because of one simple thing.
You're the only.
We're the only one, because we have our own streaming service, farsightprime.com, which is technically equivalent to Hulu, Netflix, Disney, Paramount Plus, and so on. We have way over 150 major projects, some going 3 hours long in terms of you get to see everything, all of the remote viewing sessions, all recorded under scientifically defensible conditions, which means totally blind. And so, yeah, this is that's the farsightprime.com. That's the streaming service, and that's where all of the major projects are that we have. And our captions are great. So it's a worldwide thing. We have 12 languages for all of our captions. So
when you say projects, what do you mean?
We are talking about remote viewing projects, and they are projects where we have multiple remote viewers, like 4 or 5, sometimes 6, all doing the same topic. And they all do their work alone. They do their work without any knowledge of the project or the target. That means totally blind. And our typical approach for our standard collection of remote viewers is solo as well. We use something called instrument blinding protocols, which is better than blind or double blind, meaning they know nothing about the project or the nature of the target or anything. They just know there's a target, and they are supposed to remote view it using the procedures that we have spent 10 to 12, 14 years teaching them. They're the best on the planet. And these remote viewers do their work totally solo. Totally um, solo all the way up to recording on video. So they've not only been, we used to use paper and pen, so we don't use that. We use tablets. They write their sessions on tablets, but we still call it paper and pen. And then after that, they go to video. And when they describe their stuff on video in very optically interesting cinematic ways, for example, they describe the stuff often using a light board, which is a $6,000 piece of optical glass in a dark black room. So, and they have dark clothing on, so it looks like they're disembodied heads and faces, and they're drawing with markers on this glass, and it looks like they're drawing in space. Anyway, they do that alone in the studio. There's nobody in the studio when they do that kind of work.
And these are psychics, essentially.
Well,
right?
there are people we don't call them psychics, we call them remote viewers, because they use a very highly structured methodology that was derived from the methodologies for remote viewing that were developed by the U.S. military and used for espionage purposes. The military closed down their original program, and they released some of their remote viewers into the public with the idea that they would stay in the New Age bookstore community and not be taken seriously by mainstream science. But Farsight was very different from that. So we took the original military procedures and greatly evolved them because we didn't like the way they were originally. They just didn't do what we wanted them to do. So we modified them considerably so that they do it. You only get what you ask for. So you have to ask for a certain number of things in a highly structured manner by people who have been trained years in doing this type of thing to get the information you need and for it to be accurate. But it's done totally solo. And at the end, and totally solo in the studio, even when they're doing their stuff on video. And then on video, they are finally told, they're together with somebody and someone says, well, do you want to know what the target is that you just spent hours and hours working on? And then you can see they say, yeah, I'd like to know what that was. And then on camera, they're told what the target. And then it's always one of those WTF moments. What? Are you serious? That was it? You can clearly see they had no idea what they were doing. And the interesting thing is when the audience is watching the remote viewing, the audience knows what the target is because there's an introduction where we tell what's going on, but they're watching the remote viewer describe the session under totally blind conditions. And it's very clear that the remote viewer doesn't know, but they're describing it exactly. So some of our projects are like 40 minutes, 50 minutes. Other projects go to three plus a little more hours. We have never had a complaint that anything was too long because it's like on the edge of your seat. You're watching someone who's totally blind to the target, describing it exactly. So there's another aspect of the scientifically defensible aspect as well to this, which is we have multiple viewers doing the same thing. So you have 4 or 5 people describing the exact same thing, all under totally blind conditions. That level of corroboration is astounding. Also, all of our projects have something that's verifiable. For example, when we did the Great Pyramid of Giza project, that project, people say, okay, well, you found extraterrestrial influence huge in building the Great Pyramids of Giza, which
Zahi Hawass disagrees. Zahi Hawass was on Joe Rogan a couple of days ago. I'm going to have him in the studio in a couple
the
weeks.
People that sort of have a mainstream idea of what they think did it, they're just nuts.
Yeah.
But we know exactly what happens, and we have different multiple remote viewers doing it under totally blind conditions, and they describe it. And then the critics come out and say, but you're talking about esoteric stuff. And you say, there's nothing verifiable in that. And I look at them and I say, what the heck are you talking about? Look, this under totally blind conditions, the remote viewers perfectly describe the desert, the arrangement of 5 pyramids, people running around in loincloths with camels. What do you mean that's unverifiable? Go to Egypt and take a look at the Great Pyramid of Giza. That's what the setting was, and they got that perfect. And then the only thing added to it. So that's the verifiable type of stuff that's associated with every target.
And so this is on your YouTube channel. You've got a video.
Yeah, actually, that particular project we have on for free on YouTube, but all of our projects are on farsightprime.com. But some of our projects, the JFK assassination, the 9/11 stuff, the Great Pyramid of Giza. Those we also have for people to see on YouTube.
Okay.
But most of our stuff we have on farsightprime.com. We do publish a news program called Deep News on YouTube as well every week. I mean, every month, usually 3 or 4 a week.
This
I
is
mean, 3 or 4 a month. I'm
This
sorry.
is a nonprofit organization that you
Farsight is two things. We have a nonprofit, Farsight Research Inc., which is the Farsight Institute, and that's nonprofit, and that's where we have a lot of instructional materials that we give up for free on our regular Farsight website, which is farsight.org. But we're also a normal movie company that focuses on remote viewing with an interest in extraterrestrial content as well. But the Great Pyramid of Giza thing, for example, it's very clear how those blocks were moved. And you can somebody can say, can come up with a reason for how they think it was done. But look at it. Those blocks were cut with such laser precision that when they were put in place on the pyramid, you cannot stick a human hair between the blocks. They were perfectly done. Some of them are 80 plus tons, in weight. And they were taken from a quarry that was very considerably far away. And I've heard everything, that they flooded the whole pyramid place with water and they used boats. And that they didn't have any boats that could carry 85 tons. Anyway, but
That's
then
what Joe McMoneagle said on this podcast a couple of weeks ago, that he remote viewed and that he saw the blocks being carried down the Nile on rafts, and that they flooded that area. And I've had a lot of people come out and say that that's just impossible, that you couldn't flood the pyramid. And so it was the one time in that interview, and I was so excited for that interview, but it was the one time in that interview where my skeptical meter kind of went off, because it was like I asked him if he saw the remote viewing happening, and he said yes, he actually remote viewed the pyramid being built, and then he went to describe it, and he said, well, I believe what happened was, and it's like, well, it's one or the other. You either saw it or you believe it. It's either an experience or a belief.
Yeah.
And so that for me was the one I was hoping I went all into that interview, so excited about it, and recognizing that the CIA has backed up that this Project Stargate is real, and that they've declassified documents on it, and I was with them, for the whole time, and then that one thing kind of threw me off. So I was excited to talk to you today as kind of a follow up to that, and kind of hear your thoughts.
I have a solid rule that I don't talk about what other people talk about, but what we have done is we know what created the Great Pyramid of Giza, and everything that we have matches what we see on the ground. That those were incredibly, even the cutting of the rocks were incredibly precise. And these are huge rocks. So to imagine cutting the rocks and they go on for meters, they're huge rocks, and there's not a single wave in the rock. It's all perfectly straight all the way down. That has to be through laser type of stuff. Well, we actually saw it. They were using cutting devices, beam type devices to cut them. And they used a sound-based levitation type of thing. You can actually see on YouTube, people are experimenting now. There are methods to use sound-based types of things, and the things float and they move around. So the type of, I'm not saying that methodology they're using on YouTube is exactly what they use, but in principle, there's ways to lift things. Anyway, they lifted these things, and there were people running around in loincloths, but they were holding devices that were told, and these big blocks were being floated through the air until they got perfectly placed. And, and I'm not saying that there weren't boats going up and down the Nile, but they weren't carrying all those rocks like that. And they put them into place, and with enormous levels of precision. And it wasn't just a few; those are lots and lots and lots of rocks. And there's some other archaeological sites where the rocks that were being cut out of the stone were even larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza rocks. And there is no possible way people with primitive technology back then could have done it. But our project, if you look at it from start to finish, it has all the verifiable stuff exactly correct. And if under totally blind conditions, if they were describing everything that's verifiable exactly correct, then why is the other stuff not correct? It is, it's not. And that's what the military did. By the way, the military did have this Stargate program. They shut it down, and then they said it was a big mistake. Sorry, but that's not the case. They started it right. They started it right back up, and they have their own remote viewing project is much bigger now than it used to be, but it's totally secret.
It didn't make any sense to me that they would shut something down that was so successful after 23 years. And
one of our directors,
very strange.
One of our board of directors at Farsight, the nonprofit side, was Michael Duvall. And Michael Duvall was one of the top 5 people in 2 administrations. And that was Nixon and Ford. And his wife, in fact, Janet, she was one of the major people in the Reagan administration as well. But anyway, so Michael was in the top 5 people of both the Nixon and the Ford administrations, and he went back after he took our course in remote viewing, and he became one of our board of directors, and he went to Washington afterwards, and I guess the people I think are dead at this point, but he talked to some of the people in the Reagan cabinet who were leftovers from that time period, and they were the top in that day. They were on the news all the time. They were the biggest of the biggest, economically and other things. And he talked to one of them, a couple of them, a few of them, in fact, and he asked them about the military program, and they were friends, and they just point blank said, we had some issues with some of the people that were involved in the program early on, but we had no issues at all with the fact that it worked. And then when Mike pressed a little harder, like, well, what's going on now? They wouldn't go into it, but they said it was the process itself was both valuable and it worked. And they were saying that off the record to Mike. I can actually tell you who he was talking with, and you'd know those people. And I think they're dead now, so I think it wouldn't matter too much, but I don't think Mike wanted me to say their names, but they were
high level.
You would know them immediately if I said it. And so the project is still going on, and they're not going to say, and if it ever does come out that they have this remote viewing project still going on, they're using methods that we don't use. We don't like those methods, but they are using methods that they're experimenting with.
The Russians still doing this too?
Yeah, the Russians do all this type of stuff. Russians are very interesting in all of this stuff. In fact, it was the early cosmonaut experiments that the Russians were doing. It was the Soviets back in those days that had interesting results when they started to test the ability to do telepathy. They found out that their cosmonauts could do telepathy more easily with greater reliability a lot in orbit than they could talk telepathically, communicate telepathically more easily in orbit than they could when they're on the ground, which was that was one of the first indications that there's a psi suppression field on the planet itself that sort of dampens the ability to do remote viewing on the so if you get away from the planet, that psi suppression field is less.
So on the back to the Egypt for a second. So the all of those limestone blocks came from relatively close to the pyramid. They were quarried from right near the pyramid.
Some of them came from pretty far away.
Well, the granite blocks came from far away.
Oh yeah, okay.
So the big 80-ton granite blocks that are in the King's Chamber and above the King's Chamber came from 500 kilometers away. Would have had to have been floated down the river, or that would have probably been up the river. Down the river, down the river north.
Our data seemed to describe they were being floated over land.
Okay. Okay. Oh, right. So that would have been the way that they would have done it. There's like 2.4 million blocks of limestone in that thing. Although Zahi Hawass is now saying it's closer to 1.4 million because of this. He's saying that the bottom layer of it is actually bedrock. But like, so have you guys so you guys went and you saw the construction of the pyramid happening, and how many people were remote viewing this? And,
well, in that particular project, there was 2 people, Dick Algire and Des Smith.
Okay. And so they saw it happening, and they saw alien intervention taking place along with.
More than alien intervention, aliens were sort of orchestrating the entire thing, and the people were just. They even had among the people who were actually doing the cutting. It was a very toxic environment to cut the rocks using the weapons, or no, the devices that were slicing the rocks. A lot of fumes came out. They had a what you might consider just like different species of people that were designed specifically just to be miners.
Okay.
And not miners, not in terms of age, but miners in terms of digging and cutting. And they did wear some protective clothing, masks and stuff like that, but they were essentially expendable, and they were exposed to extreme toxic, fumes and stuff like that. They didn't last very long. And they were part of the mining, and it was a different group of people that were involved in the moving and then in the placement. And the placement, you think about these rocks, these are big rocks, heavy rocks, like big rocks, really heavy rocks. They have to be placed exactly correctly it's a delicate operation. So it's not just could they have floated them up the river, but how could they have lifted them and placed them exactly? There's our explanation based on what we actually we have, what we've actually seen we consider that data gotten under defensible, scientifically clean, blind conditions. It makes sense. Everything that we say makes sense. The only way a different methodology that you see with mainstream people could possibly even remotely even be thinkable is under the idea that there is no such thing as extraterrestrial life, that there's no UFOs, that there's no such beings around here. And we can get to that, dealing with contemporary stuff, but you have to actually wipe off the entire idea that there could be extraterrestrial intervention. You have to say, under the conditions that no life exists out there except here on Earth, and we are the only ones in the universe, and there never could have been intervention here. Under that condition, I think they floated those rocks down the river. I mean, that's what you're dealing with. So you have to, in order to accept their ideas, these mainstream ideas, you have to buy into a whole ball of wax of crazy thoughts about, don't let me think about that idea. You have to say, I'm not going to consider this as a possibility. And as soon as you do that, then you can say, okay, the fairy godmother brought the rocks down, and believe that. You can say anything you want. As soon as you start cutting ideas out of the discussion, you're sunk.
3 quick questions about the pyramid. The date, are you able to get a date for when this was taking place, the construction?
No, but the numbers are really hard to get with remote viewing. We have run into this problem a lot. Remote viewing picks up events. So you have to do the dating based on normal types of stuff. So you can target something like at the time that they were constructed, because they obviously exist, so they were constructed at some time. But it's hard to say this year. And even when we do modern stuff, we typically have targets written for ballpark areas, like from May to December 2025. That's a ballpark, because really with remote viewing, you pick up events. You don't pick up an abstract number. So you're sort of ballparking it as best you can.
Right.
So with regard to the Great Pyramid of Giza stuff, we're dealing with what we think is, when it was built, and we're not asking the question of exactly what year it was built. For people who want to go into the dates for things like that, again, mainstream is sort of hopeless about it, but there are people like Graham Hancock that do go into dating much more seriously, and he's fascinating. I just think Graham Hancock is great because he keeps an open mind with regard to dating and stuff like that.
Yeah, he does.
And I love to see him in debates with mainstream people that I think just have ridiculous arguments that criticize him, and he just keeps his composure and he keeps on talking about the dating of stuff.
Right.
And so, anyway, but dating is an issue.
Okay, got it. What about the function? Were you able to pick up did the Great Pyramid itself have a function?
Yes. This is the best we can figure. Okay. It has no practical function. It is a huge monolith, all of the major pyramids. Let's talk about the Great Pyramid of Giza. It's a huge monolith. that has no function for shelter. It cannot protect anybody. You cannot grow crops in it. It can't do. It's just there. It was designed by a group of extraterrestrials who were using it to help monitor and control the human population, which was at the time being run as a very, very severe, dramatically oppressive prison. It's still a prison to this day, which is something we can talk about, but it's not the same. But when this particular group of extraterrestrials could do anything they wanted without interference from any other group of extraterrestrials, that's what they were doing. And that pyramid was, among other pyramids that were built around the planet, was designed to produce a mystery. And to this day, it's still a mystery. And that was exactly the point. It was designed to produce worship, to produce awe, to produce inspiration, to produce questioning, but not to have any practical purpose. So all the people that died in the construction of that, who were tortured in the construction of that, it was all for some purpose of mass manipulation. Nothing good came out of that. It was a worship item. And that was at the time that they had the Greek and Roman gods, as well as the Egyptian gods and so on like that. And all those gods were real. They were there. They were extraterrestrials. And for example, Zeus, he wasn't a god. He was like you and me. He literally had a physical body like you and me. He flew around in a spaceship. He was the warden of the prison at that time. And he was a guy, Zeus, who flew around with his ship and with his, his crew and his ship to rape underage girls in front of their parents. That was Zeus. He was no god. That was a great god. He should have been in the prison. He should not have been running the prison, but he was a warden, and he just took it as his harem. And he had a fetish for underage girls, and he liked them in front of their parents. That was Zeus. And he was the prison warden. Same with Ra and all that stuff. And the Ra you get with the Book of One and stuff like that is the same damn guy. He's trying to reinvent himself, create, the victors always create their own history. Now he's trying to make himself look like a prophet, not a good guy, someone who's communicating. But he's got the same control freak personality he had back in the old days. And he's got a whole bunch of followers. And he's got the people that are doing the channeling for him saying, oh, they need to be moved like one tiny degree tilted to the right or tilted to the left to get it just right. Getting everybody up on pins and needles that everything has to be exactly right to follow exactly. None of that stuff is for real. He's just manipulating as a group, and he's trying to change his public. He knew that the real truth of what was going to come out of who he was, what he was like, what Zeus was like, the whole thing, that all that stuff is eventually going to come out, and he's trying to recreate a public image that makes him sound like one of the good guys. So, if Hitler was back here and he was working today, he'd come out, he'd probably start out saying, I was a Peace Corps volunteer. And he would, the point is, people that do bad things, when they're finally caught, they like to say, I was just one of the guys. We were just doing our stuff and doing that. Yeah, and I believe in all good stuff as well. And that's the type of thing. But back in those days, there was no external other extraterrestrial group to oppose that group. And if you want to go back to the great days of Egypt, I hope you like working with rock, because that's the way they would run this prison today if they were totally unopposed.
So it was built, a couple questions there. So it was built to break people free from the Matrix, essentially?
No, not to break people free. This was the imprisonment. This was before there even was a Matrix. This was to keep people in a total abject total slavery. These were everybody on the
pyramids themselves.
What's that?
The pyramids themselves were to keep people enslaved?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mentally enslaved.
Okay.
This is not a prison with bars. This is a prison that's a mental prison. Yeah. And it doesn't cost the extraterrestrials anything to build something like that. It's all human labor. They're all slaves. They don't care if people die or are tortured. And so they just build this stuff. And all in terms of energy consumption, they have the ships already. They have the energy devices to do this. To them, it's just like a game. But it does produce these religions. And these religions are ways that keep people.
I got you.
Yeah.
Right.
And
okay. I thought you were saying it was a way for people to break free, to see that there's something bigger and more powerful and different than the
it's
human
to keep them enslaved.
Enslavement. Okay, gotcha. So
because they see this great pyramid they get into they have a mystery, and then develop, and you can develop all sorts of gods that go along with it.
Right, right. Okay. So how is it that, how do you see this? Do you remote view yourself, or is this coming from your remote viewers that have seen and observed this?
I have done lots of remote viewing myself, of course. In order to do this, I've written a few books on my own personal journeys and things like that. But I am typically the CEO of these projects. I come up with the targets for these things. So for these projects that we do, I am not one of the participating remote viewers, because everything has to be done totally blind. So since I designed the targets, I I can't do the remote viewing at the same time. But I am an academic, and I do not do. I'm an academic at a major university, fully tenured and so on. But I'm a mathematician that works within a social science program. So I teach statistics and nonlinear modeling, as well as courses on elections, things like that, in my university. But I don't do anything that we're talking about here at my university. Uh, and so, but nonetheless, being an academic, I'm good at designing projects and making sure all the controls are there, all the scientific controls, everything's done blinded. I'm good at sort of that type of scientific stuff. So yeah, I don't do the remote viewing, but we have trained. Now, we did not train Dick Algeier or Daz Smith, but we trained everybody else that we work with. And Dick Algeier and Daz Smith don't work with us today. They have gone off and done their own thing. But everybody that works at Farsight now, we've done training for that. So it's all sort of homegrown, using our own methodologies, which are different from the military methodologies.
So what if I want to get to the UAP conversation in a second, because I think that's going to blow everybody's minds, and sort of this Cold War situation that's happening is fascinating. Yeah. But maybe prior to that, what is, besides the Great Pyramid, and I think my audience is going to find that super fascinating, what would be the second project that you think is, the most interesting, fascinating, revolutionary, that you've been able to go back and remote view and learn about some event from our distant past, or relatively near past, that you think is worth sharing with the audience?
There's no second project. Let me just list the types of projects that we have. When we have gone after, say, 150 some odd projects, that's a lot of projects.
Yeah.
So there's no like one or two that's going to be like perfect. That's going to be like the next big thing. The pyramid one, of course, sounds really great. But on farsightprime.com, you'll see that the projects are divided up into categories. Now, we also have our main website called farsight.org, where we have them sort of organized in terms of publication dates and background information and so on. But the farsightprime.com actually has them full blown, and you can see them. And they're organized by categories. So the question that you just asked, like, what is the next big one? I really have to say, it depends on the category you're in. So if you're interested in political stuff.
Nope.
Okay. Well, if you were, then 9/11, assassination of JFK, things like that, those are really big. And those things are all coming back. People are starting to talk about the 9/11 stuff in big time. Like Candace Owens is talking about it. Tucker Carlson's talking about it. It's now become sort of a thing. People are actually questioning about that, the whole narrative of what actually happened.
Yeah.
The assassination of JFK, that whole thing. But when you come to extraterrestrial stuff, you have to say, well, okay, how about we isolate archaeology first? What's going on just with the archaeology, and does the extraterrestrial stuff come up? Well, we just did an archaeological discussion of the Great Pyramid of Giza. We just recently published the project on the Kailasa Temple in India. And that was a fascinating project, because no one to this day understands how the lower cave type of temples were constructed, and the Kailasa Temple is one of them. And what's so interesting about that, it's an example of 3D printing. It was done by an extraterrestrial ship using an energy thing, like a laser type of thing, and they printed it. There's no other way the Kailasa Temple could have been built, because you have this intricate type of carving. It's a slope. And the temple is built inside the slope, meaning it was dug out of the slope, out of solid basalt. And basalt is one of the hardest rocks. And even to this day, you need special cutting tools to be able to cut through basalt. And back in the day when it was done, there were no cutting tools that could do that kind of thing. And the level of intricacy of the carvings on that are built, that are cut into the wall, there's no like, it wasn't assembled like with blocks. It wasn't assembled with like blocks. It was cut. The whole thing was cut in one piece out of the rock. And yeah, so you can see it right there. There's the Kailasa temple. Now, if you look at that, you see it's a slope, and the entire temple with really intricate construction down below is all cut out of rock. It wasn't assembled like with bricks. There's nothing like that at all.
Yeah, this place is crazy.
It was just cut. And you see statues and all types of things that were cut. And these things are cut inside and well, that was a perfect example of 3D printing. But it was a ship that did it, and it had a weapon. It had not a weapon. Well, we would call it a weapon. It was like a beam thing. And it cut that thing out. So we were just interested in, I was not looking for anything extraterrestrial. In fact, I was purposely looking for an archaeological thing. And I was not expecting or wanting, when I came up with this target, with anything extraterrestrial, but I couldn't figure out how they built it. And sure enough, the results came in by all the remote viewers, the same people. Everybody described the same thing. This ship coming out above and just sort of carving it all out. And it was the same reason for you see that? How can, and none of those things were cut and then put in place.
Right. It's a part of
it's
the
all
bedrock.
one rock. It's all one thing.
Right. It's
and
the mountain. It's what's left after they've taken the stone out of the mountain.
And no one knows where the stone went.
Uh-huh.
There's no there's no like pile of junk stone. It's gone. So it was like vaporized. And yeah, so that's an archaeological thing. And we were not expecting or wanting any type of extraterrestrial content on this. I just wanted to know how they built the thing. But sure enough, our explanation, done with multiple remote viewers, all working under defensible, scientifically clean, blind conditions, they all described the same slope, the same object, the same beam, cutting out the rock. And so as far as, and so what is the verifiable stuff? The verifiable stuff is the temple. And they all described it. So we got it correct.
Yeah.
Then do you believe the description that they added to that? Well, they didn't know what the target was on any of it. So why should the temple stuff be correct, but the extraterrestrial ship carving it out be incorrect? When in fact, that is really the only explanation I can think of for how it could possibly be done. And if you look at 3D printing now, as it's done with human machines, that's the level of, that's what you get with 3D printing. You get stuff that's intricate, like designed. That's what you get. All you have is a better one that can do it out of rock.
But so 3D printing, you're taking filament, plastic filament, and it's going through you're building it from the ground up with
now the difference here is with 3D printing that we do, we use a computer program that orchestrates the placement of the material to produce very complicated designs. The only real difference here is they use 3D printing in the reverse. So rather than to add the interior, piece by, with the 3D printing the way we do it, they used a laser to cut away everything else. But it's the same
top down? From
the top down, but it's the same type of concept of 3D printing. Instead of using the material to build something up, you'd use like an energy thing to cut away the material that's surrounding it. But the result is the same. You get a very complex design that was done with computer-controlled devices to either build it up or cut the stuff away.
Was there any sense for where the material went as they viewed this thing being?
Seemed like it just vaporized and went. They don't. To this day, they don't know where the refuge. There should be huge piles of rocks.
What did the ship look like? That was it?
Just
one
like
ship,
a standard UAP type of thing.
Like a saucer, like a.
Yeah, it was not exactly saucer shaped, but it looked like even today UAPs come in many different configurations, and it was like one of those.
Okay.
And they had ETs inside the ship, and they in fact did it for the same reason. We did deep mine probes to go in, and yeah, you see there is Aziz describing his session.
Like one of the Like an oval shape, almost like a tic tac kind of a thing.
Now, when he's describing this, he does not know what the target is.
Right.
So he's on video here describing, he's my son, he's describing this stuff that he's seeing, and he sees this thing cutting this thing out of the ground, creating, and he doesn't know that, he didn't know it was now he's got a degree from memory and on anthropology with a focus on archaeology, and he's gone on archaeological digs out in the Middle East and so on like that. And so this is this is a target that I thought would interest him, and in fact he was interested when he finally found out. But at the time that he's describing this on video, he has no idea what the target is. But look, he's describing it exact. I mean, you can't get better than this. It's just it's cutting something out from the ground going down.
And what was he given to start this view? Like, what information was he
Okay, that's
given?
very important. What you're given to start with. If you don't do it, you don't get paid. That's it. They're given nothing. In fact, in the old days, they used to be given target coordinates, like 2 sets of 4-digit random numbers. But we found out that there was a group in the military that wanted to create, to disrupt public demonstrations of remote viewing. And what they would do is they'd find out what the 2 sets of 4-digit numbers are, and they'd have their own remote viewers go out using the same numbers for a different target. And it would produce like a mental psychic, like a flock of birds all flocking to a place. It would produce a draw to a different target. And when we found out that they were doing that, we said, okay, then we don't even give them the target coordinates anymore. So in order to start it off, they use random numbers to start off their sessions, and they get their own. So there's no numbers that anyone knows. There's no central anything. They are not told target coordinates. They are not told what the nature of the project is. They are not told anything. And in fact, the only thing they're told is there's a screenshot that we send them on text message to say who's completed what target and whether they're going to get paid or not. That's it. And they have to complete their targets or they don't get paid by the end of the month.
So who knows what the target is?
I do.
You do. Okay.
Or whoever designs it, but I'm normally the one who does it, and I keep it on a computer file on a computer at Farsight, and then when the target reveal comes around, then the person actually doing the remote viewing gets told what the target is for the first time, and that's when we hand them a piece of paper of what the target is, and that's when you see their face. What? So what? And you should see they're almost always like flabbergasted, like what? Aziz, when he heard that the Kailasa temple was a target, he had never heard of the Kailasa temple in India, but he's big in archaeology, and he immediately on camera, started Googling it and stuff like that. And you could see his response. My gosh, look at that. It's interesting. And then he was comparing his data to the actual stuff and just all caught on camera and is put on the actual project.
So would it work and would you be comfortable if I had your son on and he was sitting in your chair and I had the target and I had it either in my head or on a computer and I asked him to go through the process and to...
Well, there's 2 problems with that.
Okay.
When we do our session... Was it?
Darn. I was hoping there wouldn't be any problems
When we do our
it.
sessions, they're done alone, and they're preceded with an hour of meditation, and the person's in sort of a deep state.
We can let them meditate. No
okay,
problem.
But wait a second. And there's also nobody in the room. And so it's not like it's not a showbiz stuff. If you have a thing like where it's in a stage like this, the conscious mind is very highly activated, and then there's a desire to be correct. There's been only a few people who can do that under those conditions. Uri Geller has sometimes worked very well under those conditions. Joe McMonagle has come close to working under those types of conditions as well, although he often likes to be alone, sort of thinking about things. But he has done things where he has shown the target and done things in public demonstrations that he did in Japan and other places very effectively. But typically it's very difficult. So what we do is we keep the target separate from the viewer, and we get the data, and then we do our stuff, and then the targets are told to us afterwards. Now, the other thing is that garbage in, garbage out. So normally we don't accept targets from just anybody because there's a whole training process for how to create a target. For example, we were doing a public demonstration and we asked, this is years ago, going back into the 1990s, where we asked an academic to give us a target so that we could, and the target they came up with was, despite giving a lot of instruction on how to do it, was Richard Nixon. And, and we didn't know what to do with it. It was very embarrassing for the whole thing. Richard Nixon's not a target. What? You have to have a date. You have a time. What was he doing? Was it Richard Nixon when he was born as a baby? Was it Richard Nixon when he was giving a speech at the White House at the moment when he was resigning, when he was giving an inauguration speech? Richard Nixon when? When he was meeting Deng Xiaoping in China? I mean, like when?
I understand what you're saying.
It has to be an exact time, an exact place, an exact setting. You can't say Richard Nixon, that's a target. That's not a target. So
sure. But what if you, so my intention on asking the question is to be able to provide credibility to what you're doing and to have an outside source verify what you're doing and to show that it's not just happening with you being the one person who knows the target, the information. And so if we could provide all of those things, if we could get the person into a room by themselves, or even if I go to your where you remote view in your studio, or they come down here and you coach me on what the appropriate type of a target is, and then I pick a random target that could that's completely unbiased, that would not be known to you or to the like how could I add credibility to this by being an outside third party who does this, or is it just not possible?
what we do to answer this question, because we get this a lot, we would be spending all of our time doing nothing but these types of demonstrations, and it would have zero effect because these demonstrations have been done by others multiple times and it had no effect whatsoever.
What do you mean no effect?
Pardon me?
What do you mean no effect?
Joe McMonagle has done this type of thing. Uri Geller has done this type of thing. Other people have attempted it, sometimes well, and sometimes, and it's not done. There's been no paradigm shift when it was done. So what we have done to answer this type of question is, rather than come to us with a state of disbelief, let us show you what we have and show you every step along the way. And then also show you the methodologies that we use. So if you want to see if it works, you are free to redo the exact same methods and to do it yourself. So rather than have us prove it to you, and then it's getting into that belief system, let us show you all of our data for all of our projects, including showing you that the person really was blind when they did the session, because you see them during the target reveal. We give you the presentation of the data, we give you the target reveal, we give you the background for the whole thing, multiple reviewers all working in the same condition. That should be enough motivation to say, if you want to test this out, it's not going to be because you tested us. We've shown you everything that there is to be shown. Now it's to the point of, why don't you let us show you how to do it? The materials that give you the information for how to do it, the actual procedures, are available on both the website as well as on the farsightprime.com. The entire instructional setting of it's in a relatively short investment of time, you can get the basic understanding of how to do it, and you can replicate the procedures yourself with simple targets and see that you yourself can do it. And then you're going to be in a situation of saying, I did it myself, and you won't have to do it like a whole bunch of times before you finally get one right. You'll start seeing results immediately. And then the next question is going to be, well, how am I going to try to persuade my wife or my friends or other people? And they're going to come to you with the exact same question you asked me. Well, if you say you can do that, let me give you a target, and then they're going to be asking you the exact same thing, and they're going to try to turn you into a Uri Geller. And at some point, you're going to say, I'm just not going to go there. If I've told you what I've done, trust me, it works. If you want to see that it works, why don't you just follow the procedures and do it yourself? And if they did do it, they would go around and try to talk to their friends. It works. I can't believe it. It really works. And then their friends will say, okay, let me see. Well, if you can really do it, let me give you a target. And it never works to do it, to ask for somebody to come in and prove it to you. The only thing that works is for people to show you how to do it, and then you do it yourself. That's the only real answer. So Matt, yes, we can do that, but you have to be the remote viewer. And you have to do the procedures. It doesn't take you that much time, and then you get the results. But I swear you're going to get the same question asked for you afterwards by people who have not experienced it. They're going to say, I'm not sure about this. Let me give you, and they're going to try to test you. And then it's going to be an imperfect scientific design. Emotions are going to be heightened. You're going to be tried to be accurate. The conscious mind is going to jump into the process. And so, that eventually you just end up saying, look, if you really want to know if it works, go try it yourself.
Okay. No, I appreciate your response and the answer for answering the question. Thank you. So let's move on to this. I get it though. It's a no. it's a hard no, and that's okay. The Cold War that's happening, the UAP phenomenon. Let's shift to the UAP phenomenon, and this is the part of the conversation that we had last night that was, I think, the most one of the most impactful to me. I mean, the remote viewing is one thing, but the UAP thing that's happening from your perspective, you're saying that you're making direct contact with physical beings, and that they're giving you information, and that you explain it. I think it's probably best if you kind of guide us through exactly what's going on and kind of set the stage for. There's two factions, and there's a bit of a Cold War happening, and with the UAP.
Yeah. Let me sort of go to the 3/4 mark and then go back. So we have real physical meetings. We have real meetings with extraterrestrials, and we've been doing that for years. Well, typically we talk to one or two at a time, but there's always a few hundred around us at the time. There's always security personnel. We're never alone. And
security personnel on the UAP side, or on your
on the
side?
UAP side. The ATs never show up alone. They always have security people.
With human UAP? With like...
Of all types, but I'd say 80, 90% look like you and me. But I want to go back to your question about that you called a hard no in terms of belief. Can you demonstrate? Because this relates to this question as well. On one of our meetings, we call it the ET board meetings that we have at Farsight. We're all 6 people at Farsight, and our team meet with usually 2 extraterrestrials. Sometimes there's a third one in the room. There's a lot of people nearby, outside, and so on. But on November 13th, we had one of those meetings, and we were still of the mindset like, we want you guys to actually just show up with the ships and stop everybody from asking. They wanted a demonstration, just like you wanted a demonstration with remote viewing. They wanted a demonstration. Just show up with the ships. And they said, okay, well, this is what we're doing. We want you to, our board meetings starting in January 2022, we've started to record. Oh, no, it was
24.
January 24, I think. We started to record. I think we might have started them recording them as early as 23. But we started to record them at the insistence of the ETs. We wanted to just keep on doing it secretly because they were giving us lots of useful information. We didn't want to deal with the public skepticism and so on. So, but they insisted that we start recording them and publish them on social media. On November 13th of this past year, 2024, they said, we're going to show up in ships, lots of them. They're going to be all over the place, worldwide. And it's going to happen right away. So we want you to publish this video, and everyone's supposed to go out. Now, we had already pioneered how to actually take video recordings on demand of cloaked UFO ships. And we can go into that a little bit later if you want. But this time we were clearly told no one's going to need the specialized equipment, infrared, high frame rates, just your normal cell phones. We're going to be all over the place, and you'll see. So that happened November 13th. On November 15th, we published a video. Took us a couple of days. We had 6 cameras editing and things. So November 15th, they did it. November 18th, the so-called drone thing exploded all over the place. And there were drones. Now, the U.S. was saying, oh, it was mostly over New Jersey, East Coast, United States, but it was totally worldwide, over Britain, over Africa, over Asia, over Australia. And there were tens of thousands of these things. And they were video recorded by everybody. And
Can you pull up the video, Ryan, from it was November 15th, 2024? Is this the one? Or
this looks like it was one of our ET board meetings. That's my son at one of the one of our meetings.
okay.
And
But you had a conversation with the ETs on the 13th of November 2024, and you published a video discussing
on the 15th, and on the 18th, they showed up every place.
And they said on the 15th, you said on this video,
they said right away it's going to happen.
Right,
and it
right.
happened 3 days after we published the video.
It's incredible.
And that started, and actually that was a big deal. Our ET board meetings, yeah, this is the ET board meetings where you actually see us talking to the ETs. Now, the ETs themselves, you would consider them invisible in the sense that you can't see them, but we have been dealing with remote viewing for a long time, and we know how to see things, or we're used to seeing things that other people can't see. And we have no trouble seeing them, knowing their gender, their clothing, what they look like, the whole stuff, but you would think they were sort of invisible. But anyway, they were talking to us, and they talk telepathically with us, and we translate those into words so that it can be picked up with the cameras. Now, the issue is that they told us that the drones were they don't like calling them drones, but they were going to show up all over the place. They did. None of them had transponders. None of them could be picked up with heat signatures, and they were visible over highly restricted airspace, Washington D.C., military bases, everything. They were worldwide. And then the U.S. military and the U.S. government didn't know what to say. They were all saying, everyone, we don't know what they were. Finally, the military came out with the idea, and they released it through a congressman to see how it would float. I have trouble saying it without laughing, but they said they were coming out of an Iranian mothership using Chinese tech. and they were flying it over the New Jersey area. Okay. And that lasted for about 2 hours. And then the Pentagon spokesman retracted it. No, that's not what happened. That's not what. And then a little while later, some days later, they came out with another one saying it was a, that was.
That's the retraction.
That's the retraction. And then the next one was, it was a Chinese mothership that was releasing all these drones, flying over restricted airspace and everything like that. And that actually got some traction in the sense that there was a Sean Ryan podcast about it where they were talking about the whole thing. Yeah, there was the guys talking about the Iranian mothership. Anyway, but that didn't last very much longer either. And then finally Donald Trump got in office, and he finally released that they were all authorized experimental aircraft that were authorized by the FAA.
That was one of the most disappointing announcements that
that was one of the most disappointing
occurred, because it's like, is that what we're going to get for the next 4 years?
Now, to this day, they have not explained it, and the drones, so-called drones, are still there, but they've gotten them off the web. So, they've gotten them off the news. So now they're not being reported anymore. But Ross Coulthart of News Nation is still reporting that the drones are still there, but they just have been knocked off of all the major media. So the powers that be have control over all the major media. Anyway, then in December,
where are they being? Because if they're still there, we don't need the media for that anymore. We have social media. I'm not seeing them on social media. Am I
yeah. Ross Coulthart is announcing that he's in contact with people who are actually seeing them and recording them still, and they're not showing up on social media. Now, Ross Coulthart is probably the most well-connected person to report on the UAP phenomenon in terms of those types of drones. So he has lots of contacts, and he's the one that's point blank saying, We're not seeing them on the news. We're not seeing them in social media, but they are still there.
Okay.
Okay. Now, I'm not sure, since they're not seeing it on the media, I'm not sure how if it's the same magnitude as before. Anyway, in the December ET board meeting that we had, they said, well, we're going to be starting to use larger ships now. But they didn't tell us, they didn't say when. And the November one, they told us when. It's going to be in a few days. And it showed up right on target. Then they said, then in the December meeting, that there's going to be larger ships. And in the January meeting, they said, we're going to focus on communication. We want people to try to answer back, like flyers, banners, anything. And in the each meeting, they started to tell us more about how they want humans to interact. And then we asked them point blank, why did this happen? And they said, well, we want to tell you now why this happened. We wanted to answer the question to you of why disclosure cannot happen by just having the showing of ships. We came in tens of thousands of ships. They were caught by video recording, cell phone cameras everywhere. And there was all types of deception. And it took some months before the mainstream could actually, and the powers that be could actually put total control over it and get it off of social media. But they have the ability to shadow ban and do other types of things to get, so people can post things on social media, but nobody can find them. So you're not seeing it, but it doesn't mean it's not happening. But it took some months for that to be sort of put in place. All of the excuses were made. What they said is, we wanted to show you that showing up with the ships is not the answer. Landing in front of the White House lawn is not the answer. We had tens of thousands of ships showing up all over the place, and everybody was able to record those, and it's made no difference whatsoever. So that's why we did it. We didn't do it to cause disclosure. We did it to show you that method of disclosure, showing you, giving you, and then you taking our word for it, it won't work. This gets back to your idea about doing remote viewing projects. Can you prove it to me? Can you show it to me? I want to see it it doesn't work. There's only one way that disclosure is going to happen. And there's only one way to convince anybody that remote viewing is a real phenomenon. They have to do it themselves. In fact, one of the best classical remote viewers that ever occurred in the early Stanford Research Institute works was a lady who was sent there by the government to debunk the Stanford Research Institute's that was out in Stanford efforts in remote viewing. And then she walked into the lab and she had an attitude on her. She was going to tear that place apart and debunk the whole thing. And the people the people doing the research said, "Oh, great, you're here. We want you to help us with this." And she said, "I'm going to be tough on you guys." And she said, "I'm sure you're going to be the remote viewer. We need you to do it." And she said, "What?" So they trained her to how to do it, and she turned out to be a great success. And that's how she became well known as one of the great early remote viewing people in the early project. Again, it was, you have to do it to know it is actually true.
But if they're able to put these drones out, not just over New Jersey, but over
everywhere worldwide,
the entire world, I mean, then that's going to be convincing a lot of people. I mean, the people in New Jersey,
didn't work.
A lot of the people in New Jersey that saw this are convinced that that there's something to this. If they're doing this over,
the powers that be controlled it, and they squashed it down. We're not having a fundamental change in our society.
Not because it was so small, but what if you did it over Washington, D.C. and New York and Tampa and Houston and Phoenix and
all those ships were available every place. It didn't make a damn bit of difference. What they were trying to point out is, to get real disclosure, you have to do it differently. And we are part of the process of making this thing work, of real disclosure. And we're going to get to that. Yeah. You're going to ask me about, well, how will it work if just showing up with the ships doesn't work? Right.
The big ships is kind of the what's coming
Even
next,
the big ships, they did start showing up with some big ships. That was quickly closed down as well in terms of reporting. But the really big ships, like the size of California type ships, they haven't happened. And people actually complained about us. They said, well, you said there were going to be big ships, and I don't see a spaceship the size of California over the East Coast of New Jersey. And so Um, they didn't tell us when the big ships. So it was one of the things we were corrected about. They said, we told you when we were going to start using the smaller ships. And we were correct because we control that. We are saying the next step is big ships, but we didn't tell you exactly when the big ships. And don't make the assumption that you are going to know when and where and how we're going to use the big ships. We're just saying we are going to come with bigger ships, but we're preparing the stage for that now. And that's what you need to ask me about. What is being done now to prepare for when the larger ships actually come?
Before we get to that, can you prove that that the board meeting that you had on the 13th, that the information where they directly told you that small ships were going to be released in a couple of days, can you prove that that was released on the 15th, just prior to the New Jersey?
Well, we published it on the 15th, and we published it on YouTube, and they have date stamps on YouTube for when it was done. And we also published it on farsightprime.com. So, and I believe we had the date in the video itself.
Yeah, good. So, yeah, I'd love to play that for people during the episode so that they can, maybe we insert it right here, Ryan, so that people can hear the exact verbiage that was said from the recording on the 13th that was released on the 15th. It was
recorded live, and that was, they told us, and they said, and we were interested too, because there was a rush for us to get the video out.
Right.
And so we got it on the 15th, and then we sort of said, now what's going to happen? So we were like, what if they don't show up? We sort of made a fool out of ourselves.
Yeah.
And then sure, on the 18th, boom, it was all over the place.
That's a big deal, and it adds a lot of credibility to what you're talking about. So, but on the big ships now, that's kind of the next step of this thing.
But they didn't tell us when.
I know. I thought that
because there's a whole bunch of stuff that has to happen before that. And then they had to explain to us, and every meeting they basically show us they don't tell us the whole they don't tell us the whole kitchen sink stuff in one meeting. Every meeting they focus on one thing, on one aspect. Like the last meeting we had, they focused on the AI, because AI was becoming important at Farsight, and they focused. And so the two ETs that showed up were AIs. They were ET AIs, and it was fascinating to actually watch the remote viewers communicate with these ET AIs. They were all saying, "These guys feel weird," and before they were describing the mental thought processes. Then. It's just different. And the remote viewers, some of them they didn't like them. They said, these feel different. And like Kamaya was saying things like, so you're saying that you know and understand and feel my pain and all that stuff, but like you're a machine, and how am I supposed to know you feel my pain? And so there was a lot of, you could see the sort of the skepticism about whether they should trust them. And I had no idea. I had no problems trusting them. They were just ETs that work on our side. They just are AI ETs. They come in, you would consider them humanoid robots, but they wear clothing just like everybody else. And
so how many remote viewers do you have in the room while the ETs
we have
are there?
In the regular, we sometimes go up to 6, but we typically have 5.
Okay.
And, we have 4 very regulars and one that participates somehow, some way. And that's 5, and one that rarely participates. But when he can, he can.
And you said they're not psychics; they're remote viewers, and that
psychics are sort of natural people who just have psychic, but it's not highly controlled, and their accuracy is not reliable. These people do a certain methodology every time under totally blind conditions. Psychics, you often say, you give them a towel, and you say, "This was a towel from my brother-in-law who died, and I want to speak to him after that," and they'll tell you, but everything's front-loaded, and they got all types of, so we don't like to go in that direction at all.
So I guess my question is, like, if you've got remote viewers sitting in a room with ETs that you can't see, that are also sitting,
we have no trouble seeing them, but yeah, I understand that you can't see.
Yeah, right. So how is it that I would have thought that a psychic would, since they're giving them information telepathically, I would have thought that a psychic would be a better medium to receive that information. What is it about a remote viewer that allows them to connect with because if it's not a psychic, if it's a remote viewer, what is it about the remote viewer that allows them to connect with that ET?
The word psychic essentially means an untrained person who's using mental abilities that are natural, but they're untrained and they're not. They may be natural. Some people can be great runners, but that's different from someone who trains for the Olympics and out there all the time and knows how to do it. And you know their timings and everything's perfect, and you know their work schedule and things like that. So what you call a psychic is using the same type of mental capabilities that a remote viewer is using, but the remote viewer is using them under totally different types of constraints and conditions where everything is very tightly controlled and monitored, and we know the historical background of everybody in that. So all of the remote viewers in the room, when we have the remote viewing, when we have the ET board meetings, they have public records of them doing totally blind work where the data are discussed while they're still blind. So you have total verification of their capabilities going back years. And it's nothing like, trust me, they really are good. It's like, don't trust me. You look at them yourselves. You look at their work and you decide if they're really good at this. And you know the methods they're using, you know the processes, you know the conditions under which they did it, and we record everything, including their description of the data, where they're still totally blind. So nothing's being hidden from you. And then we show you when they're told what the target finally is, and you get to see their response going back years. You don't get that with a natural psychic. So you don't have everything in the whole data collection process being shown. And so what we have is years and years and years of data of which there is no comparable data source anywhere for these. You have lots of situations where you can find anecdotal things of a natural psychic having said something and it turned out to be correct or something like that. But there's no like large body of data analyzing them under conditions that you can then replicate. So we have the ability to show others how to replicate. Okay, it takes a little bit of effort to replicate our work, but it can be done. We show the methods, we show the conditions, we show everything how it does. And so if you don't believe it, that's fine, but you're free to replicate it. Well, I don't want to spend the time to replicate it. Okay, then don't do it. Just have a picnic, do something else. But we showed you how to actually do it. So things theoretically can be replicated if you go to the problems of doing what we've done. And then you have to say, well, given what we've done, can we analyze that? Because now it's a body of data. And that's what we're doing right now. We have taken the captions that are available on farsightprime.com for all of our projects, like 150 projects, some of which are 3 hours long. And we're having the captions, well, we have now transcripts of the captions. So there's now in paragraph form, every word that was spoken under totally blind conditions by all of the remote viewers for all of our projects. And it's being analyzed by AI. Now, I'm an academic, but I'm telling you, it would be taking me decades to go through such a large body of data. And then someone could say, oh, but the analysis is biased because you were analyzing it, Courtney. Okay. So now we're having it done objectively, where every word collected under totally blind conditions is being analyzed by an objective AI who is going in and categorizing everything in terms of the accuracy rate for the verifiables, the accuracy rate for the news programs and things like that. What do we have here?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, these are transcripts.
Example of the transcript. How many board meetings do you have a year?
Pardon me?
How many board meetings do you have per year?
How many more minutes per year?
Board meetings.
They're typically once a month.
Okay.
And we used to have them in remote locations secretly, like 3 a.m. type of things. It's spooky. And, at the beach and things like that. But we do them now and we have a special boardroom meeting where we do it. And 2 months ago, the 2 ETs who show up were military because they wanted to give us a military background for what's going on.
Military from an ET standpoint.
Yeah, the ET side. There's a war. There's a war going. And we haven't started talking about that, but there's a war.
Right before we get to that, can I ask you, When are the big ships coming? What do you know about that? Because
The
it's
big ships are coming. You have to let me explain what the actual disclosure process is going to be. It's nothing like there's going to be another congressional hearing with David Grush and Lou Elizondo, and that'll do it. No, there's nothing like that.
okay.
And they already showed that having tens of thousands of drones didn't do it either. So it doesn't matter how many congressional hearings you have. It doesn't matter how many drones show up. That's not going to work because this planet is being run as a prison, as a psychological prison, and they have it totally locked down in terms of information control. Something else has to happen. And when that does happen, that's when the big ships happen.
Okay. Okay.
We'll get to that.
Okay. Well, can we go there now? Like,
Yeah.
what has to happen before the big ships get here?
There's basically two different groups of ETs. Now, don't isolate them in terms of species. So don't say the grays are the good ones or the bad ones or anything. On both sides, we call them the good ETs and the bad ETs. The good ETs are the ones that we've been working with. The bad ETs are the ones that the government has been working with. And they both have all species on all sides. Now, in terms of the government working with them, I can tell you a lot about that, but there's a credibility factor. Oh, yeah, sorry, the government's working with them. Show me. I come from the state of Missouri. They show me state. Okay, so you want to do that? You go to Haim Eshed, Haimeshed. Haim Eshed is the former director, the CEO of the Israeli Space Directorate for 30 years. That's their version of NASA. For 30 years. He's also a decorated general, and he's currently a college professor. Haim Eshed, now he thought he was going to get away with this. In a Hebrew publication, in Hebrew, he spilled the beans about everything. He talked about the written agreements that the United States government and some other governments have with the extraterrestrials in exchange for the ability to do experiments. And and anyway, these written agreements, which you can Google it, you can find it yourself.
Yeah, pull this up, Ron.
Haim Eshed, and the only thing was he was caught off guard because it turned out that a lot of people knew Hebrew, and it was immediately translated into a zillion language, and it was all over the place, and no one was more surprised than himself. So yeah, there is Haim Eshed.
Yeah, this went viral global instantly after
it
he
went
made
global.
these
He was
comments.
quite surprised by the whole thing.
Yeah, and he had this is a perfectly sane human individual who had in a position.
He's the CEO of the Israeli Space Director for 30 years.
Right. In a position of power. I mean, the highest position that he could get. I mean, the most knowledgeable person and on this topic. He's had no history of mental health issues whatsoever. And he's talking about direct contact with extraterrestrials, and he's talking about an agreement between the extraterrestrials.
A written agreement.
A written agreement, right. So yeah, this was mind-blowing. This hasn't been, I mean, it's been met with skepticism, of course, but
he's never retracted it.
Right, and it hasn't been debunked, like as in, and he,
No. Okay, now we have known about this.
It's interesting.
We have known about this for a long time, but I like to point this out for the people from Missouri that want to say, show me. Okay, we showed you. But the issue was, and I sort of like Missouri. I did my doctorate at Washington University in Missouri. So it was, I have a sort of a fondness for the state and their skepticism.
Okay.
So anyway, so these written agreements basically came about in the context of numerous contacts that they had around the Roswell time and before. But there was a crash, and there was actually multiple crashes. And at that time, the group that we call the good ETs, who we work with, and the bad ETs, who the government signed with, they both made an appeal, and they both wanted the government to go along with what they wanted. The government wanted the military tech. They wanted weapons tech. And my side was refusing. They were not going to give military tech. They were saying, you need something else. You don't need military tech. And the bad ETs, they offered military tech. So they had crashed ships. And they wanted to know how to reverse engineer those ships so that they could start developing their own stuff. And that's what it was. Now, what the bad ETs wanted in exchange was a written agreement to operate here on Earth. in secret locations, and and basically those are underground locations. And those locations, by the way, that was talked about recently in terms of the underground bases that exist on Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson really had a show just talking about underground bases they're huge, they're extensive all over the place. Now that show didn't go into the ET presence under there, but the human sort of governmental existence of these basically huge cities with tunnels that extend from coast to coast. It's just incredible. And anyway, so that
dumb, right? Deep underground military
yeah,
bases.
but there's train systems and everything that are amazing. I mean, it's huge beyond belief. So if you wonder where the trillions of dollars of defense spending goes, that they've lost, they don't know what it was spent on.
Yeah, can't pass it
A
on.
lot of that goes for that. Anyway, so what basically the bad ETs wanted was their written agreement to do their experiments. Now, these experiments were originally told that they would just involve, um, people with mental problems, terminally ill people, and they would sort of abduct them, but they would be returned, and they wouldn't remember what happened, and will be ever be nice. So they got the things written. That was just total fabrication and a total lie. Once they got their feet on the ground with these written agreements, they went into what was essentially the largest human trafficking operation that ever was seen in the galaxy. I mean, it was just huge. And to this day, it's still ongoing. And then they were also helping with the reverse tech with the military. So a good chunk of the military is involved in stuff dealing with getting the ship. So we do in fact have a secret space program, and then one of the consequences for this is they needed more crashed ships in order to reverse engineer some of these things. Now there's two basic ET groupings: the good ETs and the bad ETs.
Do they don't have a better name than that?
Yeah, they do, but that's the best way we can think about them, because the bad ETs are doing really horrific things. So
do they divide themselves? Do they know that they're on separate sides?
yeah, they know there's a cold war between the two groups. Now,
so how do they pick what side they're on? Like, what if they're not born into it based on a certain race or a certain, you've got the grays on both sides. Then you've got humanoid.
Yeah, everything's on either side.
Yeah.
Basically, there was a Holocaust in this galaxy. This is a war-torn galaxy. It's known among the surrounding galaxies as a bad place. It's a war-torn galaxy. And there was a Holocaust that was way worse, unimaginably worse than anything experienced on Earth. So if you think of the Holocaust that occurred during World War II, with all those millions of people who were died and tortured, that's nothing compared to what happened galactic-wide. The war that was associated with that went on for like 1,000,000 years. The war that was associated with that is basically settled. It's over. It's tense, but it's not open fighting anymore. What you have now with the bad ETs, this is a leftover area of the galaxy that's controlled by the fascist authoritarian side that was on that side of the war. They no longer answer to the central command of that large side of the galaxy that was involved in the war, but they control this area. It's sort of like saying there's a group of Nazis that escaped from Germany in World War II, and they settled in the Amazon, and they control that area of the Amazon. It's sort of parallel to that type of thing as a metaphor. But so basically what happens is it's a fascist, authoritarian, totalitarian group, and they are operating here, and they got the written agreements to be able to do that. Why was that important? Because my side, what we call the good ETs, they don't like it when I say this, but this is how I like to describe it. They're free will fanatics, meaning they won't do anything unless you agree. They're free will fanatics. They really insist on people agreeing to something. And here you had the official governmental leaders signing written agreements to participate with this group of ETs. And they did that not because they needed the written agreements for their own sake. They needed it because otherwise the good ETs would intervene. In this solar system, not galactic-wide, but in this solar system, currently the good ETs vastly outnumber the manpower, the military manpower of the bad ETs. But they're free will fanatics. And the bad ETs are taking advantage of that and saying, "Hey, we got written agreements to be here, and you don't. You didn't. They didn't sign with you. They signed with us." And so our side is been totally cut out of any influence with the political leadership, the military. No, not the total military. Military split, to be quite honest. But the corporate leadership, the media, it's totally controlled. And as was demonstrated by the drones in November and December and January, they control everything. Even tens of thousands of drones couldn't break through. And so what happens is that the good ETs are trying a different strategy. It is impossible to break through and to help this planet unless the planet agrees. It has to be a free will decision.
But it's not the planet that's agreeing, right? I mean, it's
The
like
plan is you first
people?
have to. I'm sorry?
It's like 4 people. I mean, who do they have the written agreement with? Is it just a couple people within the Pentagon? Is it?
They were written agreements that were orchestrated through the President of the United States and some others, and some other countries signed that. And then you're talking about the top leadership signing those things. And so, and those are the elected representatives, and what can you do? And my side is, they're taking advantage of the fact that we're free will people and will not do anything without an agreement. So the next question is, what's the plan?
So every president in the United States and in the foreign countries, presidents and leaders know about this agreement then?
They have been given, the presidents are temporary employees.
Right.
And so they are told minimal information. They're not told everything. And they are given some information, some less so. President Carter used to be a member of my department at Emory, and he used to come to my classes and teach, and so on. I had some conversations about this with him, and they're given barely enough information. President Carter a lot was withheld from President Carter, but some other presidents have been told more, but no one's given everything. And the military consider the presidents as being temporary employees, and if you just count to 10, they're gone, and somebody else will win the next election. So why should you worry about what somebody did or didn't know when in fact they're just going to be gone in a few years? So the military people consider themselves as permanent employees, and that they are required to keep this stuff in secrecy. Now, the military is split. There's part of the military that actually works, and Area 51 is one that's directly connected to what we call the bad ETs. We have done actually a project on Area 51, which you can watch on farsightprime.com, where our remote viewers went in, and there's lots of verifiables because you see Groom Lake, there's a desert, you see some buildings on top. We got all that correct. And then they went down and they followed the elevators to go down, and you get all the different levels. And at the very bottom levels, you get levels that are basically reptilians, and they are huge. I mean, physically, the reptilians are huge, but also what's underground there is huge. And so that's one area. For example, there are many bases, but that's one area. If you want to say, well, where are they? Well, we'll show you exactly on the map where they are. You just go down far enough, and then you can say, well, how do we know that? Well, look, everything in Area 51 is underground. Everybody knows it exists. President Obama was the first person to acknowledge that Area 51 is a military base and it exists. And if you look at it on Google Earth, it's just a couple shacks. So obviously everything is underneath. The question is, how far does it go down and what's under there? So the bad ETs have been involved in a huge amount of genetic experiments, all for the purpose of controlling this large prison planet population. So there's two questions. Why is this a prison, and what is this actually going towards? And then the second is, why are they doing this? Why do they need everybody here? So this is a prison. It's a psychological prison. It's maintained by keeping the prisoners in the dark about everything that's happening, including to themselves, which is why in the written agreements, according to Haim Eshed, as well as everything we know, but in the written agreements, part of the agreements are that it must be totally kept secret. Haim Eshed even talked about that. It's written in the agreements that there must be no publication at all of anything related to the extraterrestrial presence. My side of the ETs are totally opposed to that. Again, we have the military capability to knock them out, But we can't do that. We're free will fanatics. The population has to ask for it. And when we can't get it from the military or the civilian or the corporate leadership because they're totally bought off. Not the total military, but half the military. The military split, but everybody else has been totally corrupted. So it has to come from below. So what the good ETs have been doing in order to do this thing, it goes back thousands of years. The plan has been long in the making. But recently, what they've been doing, the first thing was to get ideas seeded into the public about what was actually possible on a galactic level. And so they started to seed ideas into the script writers of Hollywood and some book authors and so on. And basically, what was happening is the script writers and the producers would go to sleep, and in the morning they'd come up and they'd say, "I've got a great idea for a movie." And now the good ETs are free will fanatics, so they can't force the people to do those movies, but they can give them the idea, and then the person thinks it's their idea, and they say, and that's how Star Wars came about. That's where Star Trek came about. That's where the Matrix movies came about. That's where a lot of the Japanimation stuff came about with Ghost in the Shell. That's all ideas that were dropped into the heads of script writers in Hollywood. And they basically conditioned the entire planet to accept all types of ideas in record-breaking time. And they had to wait until the technology and the media was available to be able to do this type of thing. So this is the time when it had to be done. All right. Then the second thing they had to do is they said they need two things to happen. They need a disclosure movement to actually work. And then they needed to have a follow through from the disclosure movement. Once people find out that everything that they've been told is total lies, going back to the very beginning, then you're going to have a zillion questions and they have to know what follows. Otherwise, the control mechanisms will rapidly reinstill themselves and start pumping out all the lies again, and people will be back in the psychological prison. So there's going to be a window of time when people are going to be open to what really happened. And that was why the good ETs created farsightprime.com. We were the people on the ground that put it together, but they were the ones who thought of it and got it all organized. It's their library. This is the true library of what's really happened to humanity for thousands of years. And that's why the 150 plus projects are there in 12 languages, all the captions. And that's why we're now sifting through this with AIs to systematize it. The data set is already there, and the explanations, the answers. So the question is, when are people going to be actually wanting to see this huge library and get these questions answered? So what has happened is part of the plan of the bad ETs is to keep humanity in a constant state of turmoil. That's why you see after every major war or economic problem, you have something else erupting right after. Like it never settles down. It just constantly one after the next. The good ETs took all these catastrophes that the bad ETs have been setting up, but they were going to launch them sequentially over a period of like 20 years. And they were able to collapse them so that they happen simultaneously within a 2-year period. That's what's going on right now. And so what you're having with that includes the Ukraine war, the crises that you're going to have in the Middle East and elsewhere, these things and economic stuff that's going to be happening. You're going to get a major economic resets as well. What you're going to have is a complete collapse of the system. That's what's being designed. The bad ETs are ferociously trying to stop it from happening. The good ETs are ferociously trying to make sure it happens. So that now all these things were not invented by the good ETs. They were designed by the bad ETs, but the good ETs managed to compress the time that they happen, so they happen all at once, so that it completely overwhelms the control mechanism, information control mechanisms that the bad ETs have set up. When that happens, blankety blank's going to hit the fan. Everything collapses, and there will be no ability for the authorities to control the agenda anymore. That's when the big ships show up. And that's when people are not saying, let's turn on the news to find out what the president is going to tell us to lead us out of this disaster. All of that goes away. And then you start relying on your neighbors, your friends, your relatives, personal interactions. And then the good ETs show up with the big ships, and they say, you can tell we're friendly. We're not here to harm you. We'd like to help. Would you like to know what's going on? And that's when you're going to be open to it. And that's when you can get a planetary shift where the public at large, all over, says, yeah, we really would like to help. And can you help?
Mm.
And that, Matt, is a free will decision. Will you help us? And when that happens, they take over. That's when they come in and they can manage the bad ETs. Now, when that moment comes, the bad ETs are going to have a decision to make. They can't continue to control the planet through psychological means because the cat will have been let out of the bag. It'll be over. The whole scam that's been going on for thousands of years will be over. So they're in a situation, do they fight it out with the good ETs, with ships? They'd lose that battle, but it would be a battle. And then they would lose resources, they'd lose personnel, they'd lose ships for a planet they can't control anymore. The theory is that's when they'll back off. That's when they'll leave. And then the good ETs can start with the reclamation project of bringing things back. So that's the plan, and that's how we rescue the entire population. Now, there's another thing I hope you do ask me about, which is the mental state of people. Why is remote viewing so difficult? Why are we having such a difficult time convincing people that this stuff is real? Why did you ask me the question of, can you prove it that remote viewing works? Why do people not believe? I hope you ask me that question, because that question is the key to how the prison works.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's belief and there's disbelief and there's non-belief. And belief is 100%. I believe this to be true. And disbelief is 0%. I believe this to not be true. And non-belief is saying, screw this whole belief system thing. I'm just going to be open-minded.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm at. So in order for me to get from non-belief to believing something, I need to see some, need to get closer to it and understand more of the facts. So yeah, I'd love to talk about that. I've got a lot of questions for you. I've got questions on, I guess, like how you know all of this stuff. I guess it's from direct communication with the ETs themselves. I've got questions on human trafficking, on the experiments that are taking place with humans, on a lot more interesting topics. But I think probably we've been going for a little bit over 2 hours. We'd probably take a little break, get a bite to eat, come back and finish up if you're good with that.
I'm okay with that.
All right, let's do it. Good stuff. Good start so far. I really appreciate it. Well, people tend to have a difficult time believing that remote viewing is true. And I kind of started off the episode by sharing that the CIA has declassified documents about Project Stargate where they discuss specifically that remote viewing was used by them. And so I guess there's various degrees of of people's thoughts about how successful that was, whether that's the CIA or the people within the program. Joe McMoneagle said that it was extraordinarily successful, and the CIA said that they stopped it because it wasn't successful. But remote viewing in general, people have a difficult time accepting that is real. And why would you say that that's the case?
This is the question of psi functioning, PSI functioning. So the question that people are facing, and it's a legitimate question and it's a huge question. Why is it so difficult for people to believe in psi functioning? Why should farsight even be necessary to exist, to demonstrate that remote viewing exists and that the extraterrestrials exist and that we can collect this huge body of data on this? Why is this even necessary if it can be done? It all goes back to why this is a prison planet in the first place. If you look at any type of prison that you see on Earth, you see bars and cement. This is not that kind of a prison planet. In the galaxy, you keep a prison by keeping information controlled. And there's two things that has to happen. The information that people get access to has to be limited so that they only get told certain things. But also their own capabilities to be able to burst out of the psychological prison has to be constrained. So this gets to what we call at Farsight the death traps. So this is how totalitarian fascist type societies control their populations. If you look at China during Mao's time, if you look at Soviet Union during the Soviet Union time, people couldn't escape. You couldn't get out of those places. You couldn't get past the Berlin Wall. They kept things locked in. Well, in a galaxy that was originally war-torn galaxy, the fascist totalitarian side had to have a way of controlling the population. Death used to be a means of escape, of travel. You could actually go places. You die and then you go somewhere else. And if you didn't like the place you lived, then you leave and you go someplace. So they had to come up with technology that would stop that, just the way the former Soviet Union and China during Mao's time would not let people leave. So they developed technology over millions of years that we now call the death traps. And we don't use the word soul or spirit at Farsight because of the religious baggage that comes with it. We use something called Isbi. Isbi is an immortal spiritual being, or someone who is for the purpose of being, nothing else. And all of us are Isbis. You are an Isbi, I'm an Isbi, and we happen to be wearing shells or wrappers or containers called bodies. But these bodies are not us. They are physical devices, and we have computers, biological computers in the head that allow us to function in this physical reality. And our memories are stored in these biological computers. And our Isbis function in this physical reality by manipulating these physical containers. Just like when you're driving a car, you can drive in the car because you're controlling the way the car is operating. Well, the technology to keep people in the prison, we call it death traps. And it was developed and it was actually installed in places all over the galaxy, in the fascist totalitarian controlled areas. And what basically has happened, you've heard this countless times, you die. And then you pop out and you see the light. You see the light. You've heard the countless times of people having out of death, beyond death experiences and near-death experiences, or they see the light. And the light is warm and inviting, and you get drawn toward the light. And after that, it's a mess. But what they remember is they met the Council of Elders. Somebody comes out and says, we've been talking about your case with the Council of Elders. You're a very important person. And see the Council of Elders over there? And we think that, remember the argument you had with your mother and your grandmother? Remember the struggles you had with your daughter and your son? Well, we think you could work on a few personality issues. It's up to you, though. You decide, but a couple of things probably should be worked on. What do you say? You go back and just sort of work on those wrinkles? But before that happens, when you get sucked into the light, the very next thing that happens is you're hit with a bolt of electricity that's way higher voltage than a lightning, and you get rattled. So the Isbi, you cannot kill an Isbi. It is impossible for someone to grant you eternal life because no one can kill you. It is impossible. You cannot kill an Isbi, but you can lie to an Isbi, you can entrap an Isbi, you can trick an Isbi, you can shock an Isbi. And when you get sucked into that warm, inviting light, you get zapped with this bolt of electricity and you get rattled. You lose your memory of everything you've done. You lose your telepathic capabilities. You lose your remote perception, remote viewing capabilities. You're like empty, an empty shell. And that's when an AI comes out. It's not one of the Council of Elders. It's an AI comes out. It's all automated. And he's the one that says, or she's the one that says, we've been talking about your case with the Council of Elders, and see the Council of Elders. Whole bunch of new memories are flooded in. Some of them match some of the things that you've done in the past. Some of them are just new, but they're carefully designed to sort of recycle you back in. They get an agreement with you to go back in, so they're not violating the good ETs, those police things and things like that. And you come back in, and that's a so-called reincarnational system. It's all tech. It's just tech. And people, when they come back in, they don't have their telepathic capabilities. They don't have their remote viewing capabilities. They don't even know that they exist as a soul. They don't even think their Isbi exists. They have to be persuaded. They can actually go to a religion and they say that the pastor is the one who has to grant them eternal life if they get down on their knees and beg for forgiveness. And then if they say, well, no, I have not done anything wrong, then the church comes to them and said, oh, no, there's original sin. Even if you've not done anything wrong, there's original sin, and you were burned for the fires of hell throughout all eternity. but we can grant you eternal life if you do it. Now, there's all types of contradictions. If they're if they're going to burn in hell for eternity, that's still eternity. How can they be granted eternal life? And it's eternal life either way. So all types of contradictions, but it's all psychological mechanisms for control, and fear is used to do that. That's what all the religions are based on. Either you surrender and get on your knees, or you will be punished. And that is all part of the information control system that's installed. So it's buttressed by the after death experience. The basic bottom line is when you die, don't go to the light. The light it's designed to be warm, inviting, to suck you in, and so on. If you die as a shock, like if there's some shocking incident, you may be rattled and you may just get sucked into the light. But the light is it's not God, it's technology. And it's part of the entire prison control system. So when people come back here, they're growing up and they have no recollection of who they are, their memories, nothing's there, nothing's right. And they don't believe they exist as immortal beings. They think that when they die, they physically die. And even if they're like super smart, they don't get this all. And that's the population we're dealing with. Now, I can say authoritatively, I've had lots of conversations with ETs about this. All the ETs, the good ones and the bad ones, they think of this planet as a planet of zombies. What is a zombie? It's dead but not dead, going around and hurting a bunch of people, so on. So this prison planet is not a planet that you want to fix. It's a planet you want to get off of. This was never designed to be a permanent, long-term civilization planet. Every 26,000 years, it goes through as a major, either a pole shift or a coronal mass ejection. It gets reset back to zero with just a few survivors. Every 26 to 70,000 years, something happens and everything gets sort of brought back. This is not a place you want to stay forever. This planet was thought of originally. It's perfect for biological stuff such as flora, fauna, things like plants and animals and stuff like that. But for a living civilization, this is not a good place. But during the time when the galaxy was being torn apart in the war, this was a place of refuge for people trying to escape the bad side, the totalitarian side. So they came here because nobody else wanted the planet. And this was very useful in that case. But the bad side eventually figured out where people were escaping. Remember, they were trying to contain the population, but some in the population eventually figured out how to escape their death traps, and they came here. And then when the bad side discovered where they were coming, they showed up and they said, okay, well, they're here anyway, so we'll just keep them here as a prison. And then this became a favored prison for all types of places, including a couple places outside of the galaxy and other galaxies. Because if you have bad people you want to get rid of, well, you can't kill an ISB. So if you punish them by killing them, you're not killing them. They'll just be born again and do bad things, horrific things. That's why we have a lot of, pedophiles. We have a lot of murderers and rapists and evil, bad people. That's people, they were that way before they got here. But we also have an extreme high concentration of extremely creative and good people, geniuses. There's probably the highest concentration of creative geniuses anywhere in the galaxy is here. Because if you think about it, in other places where everything is, there are no reasons to invent anything. Everything that can be invented has already been invented. And people who are really creative are just trying to change things. And they've got the civilization out there that's already moving smoothly. They don't need those people. So they irritate the people, and eventually they just throw them, say, get them out of here, and they throw them into prison. For example, what happened to Socrates? The only thing Socrates did was ask people questions when they went down to the market in order to get them to think. That irritated people so much, they killed him. They couldn't take it. But Socrates was an example of that. But artists and creative people, they're designed to theater shock, to get people to think. And that eventually really upsets people. So you get both a very highly creative genius population, but you also get a lot of bad people thrown in. And this is a great place for a prison in that respect, because since you can't kill an ISB, You get them trapped here and they can't escape. And if by chance, if you're in another galaxy and you're trying to get rid of the people you don't want and you throw them in here, then you're pretty much getting rid of them for good, because they get, even if they can get out of the prison eventually, they're then in another galaxy. They've lost most of the memories and they're probably not going to wind their way back to where you were in the first place. So it's a way to really get rid of people. So the good ETs are here because the vast majority of the population on the planet Earth, I mean, the vast majority are their friends and relatives and so on who were thrown here. They didn't escape from the authoritarian, totalitarian side. They were basically, most of the population was thrown here. Nobody is from this planet. And so they want them back. These are friends and families. They're trying to get everybody back. This is billions. Now, the real question you say is, well, why is the prison being maintained? The bad ETs aren't stupid. They're not trying to maintain a prison and have these resources just for the heck of it. The bad ETs are like any other totalitarian fascist group. Look at what happened during Hitler's time. They're trying to expand. They want to expand. They have a belief system that unless they expand, they'll be crushed. So they want to expand. They want to go out into the galaxy. And in order to do that, they need ISBs, billions of ISBs. They need them for soldiers. They need them for prostitutes to service those soldiers. They need them for tradespeople. They need them for all types of things. But they need ISBs to go out into the galaxy. So one of the reasons the good ETs are here is following timelines into the future. If they don't stop this from happening here, the Holocaust that goes into the galaxy from this location outward is beyond even what happened in the past. It's horrific, beyond belief. This is the last bastion of the worst elements of the authoritarian side that had this Holocaust happen in this galaxy in the first place. This is when they are concentrated. And if they have billions of ISBs to repopulate and to march out into the galaxy, that would be a level of concentration of bad stuff that surpasses what happened even in the past. And so this is where it's got to end. This planet has to have the prison walls broken down, and these are psychological prisons. So this has got to have a situation where people's memories come back. And you have to have a physical source for what really has happened in the galaxy and on the planet, and in the politics and the archaeology and the old extraterrestrial involvement. That has to be available for people to see. And that's what the library at farsightprime.com was all designed to be. It was to answer the questions of what really has been going on in this place for literally thousands of years.
And so what really has been going on is what you're telling me, and you're getting all of this information from the ETs directly. And so that's why...
No. Much of it is us piecing it all together through all of our projects. They insisted that we go through the discovery process. All of us had to be born as humans with human parents and go through the normal educational system and then discover this all. They couldn't have us just be deposited here and tell everybody.
So this is a very detailed understanding or belief about reality, about the nature of reality that you're articulating here on the show today. And so there is tremendous detail involved, and the story is it's very complex.
Complex is the understatement forever.
Yeah. So I guess the question is really if part of this information is coming from the ETs directly, and part of this information and your understanding of reality is coming from kind of piecing things together, how much of it is coming from directly from them versus what you've pieced together?
Okay. In order for this to happen, you can't get onto this planet unless you come in as a prisoner. So in order for this to happen, they had to have people on the inside to bring this stuff out. So we had to have the library done from the inside.
But is that even the truth, or is that a belief?
When I came in, my son and I, Aziz, we were involved in the original plan to do this. I'm not saying we invented the plan, but we were involved in the original plan I very clearly remember the meeting that we had beforehand. I was supposed to come in first. The difference between, say, myself and my son is that we were not processed through the death traps. We didn't get the shock treatment. We didn't lose our memories. From myself, speaking for myself, I've had ET contact, direct ET contact my whole life when I was a kid. I had to be protected, otherwise I would have been killed. They would not have, the bad ETs would not have allowed me just to come in and just be by myself. For example, when I was sleeping, when I was a kid, I had to come in as a kid with a normal human parent and so on like that. Normal human parents. And, but when I was sleeping as a kid, I had 4 ETs, 2 on one side and 2 on my left side, 2 on the right and 2 on the left every single night when I was sleeping. And they were the ones that you would call grays, the guys with the wraparound eyes. And they never did anything bad to me. But they were always helpful. I was appreciative that they were there. It was like they were guards. But I had 2 on my left and 2 on the right. And these are not things I had to come up with dream, hypnosis, resurrection. They were just 2 on my left and 2 on my right. And I'd sleep every night. And I used to ask them, should I tell my mother about this? And they said, no, she'll just get worried and upset. Just let it be. We'll handle it. So they were always there. And also I had my own memories coming back. It's comical for myself to, I knew I was supposed to be on a ship, for example. I used to build spaceships. I used to try to come up with all types of ways to get in, to build a spaceship so I could fly out again. And,
but back to the question. I mean, because we don't have unlimited time, you know, I want to, so with regards to this construction of reality, your understanding of reality as it exists today, based on all of the communication that you've had with the ETs and all of the stuff that you've pieced together, your creation of reality is determined based on those 2 factors. And so how much of that reality from a percentage standpoint is based on direct knowledge from the ETs, and how much is based on what you've pieced together?
The process of doing my job here, developing Farsight, getting everybody hired, doing all of the projects, we had to do that here. But the process of what to do was often told to me. I've been on the ships many times. I have a daughter on the ships who's a hybrid, she's usually the one I interact with, liaison with when I'm on the ships. We even did a remote viewing project on that under totally blind conditions. They all came with the same thing. They all described the daughter and so on. She's sort of half grayish, half humanish, and I'm very proud of her. She showed me what she does, and we sit together. But she's the one that sort of gives me the download of what I need to know to do. But if you look at Farsight, we have like 2 important studios, the best of equipment. I was an academic. I knew how to write books. I didn't know how to do any of that stuff of doing studios and all the equipment and getting an aura. And we were the ones who pioneered how to actually video record cloaked ET ships on demand. That information was given to us. We didn't develop it ourselves, but we're the ones who do all those. I mean, how did all that happen? We were told a lot. The remote viewing procedures that we did, I tried to revise the original military remote viewing procedures because I was troubled by them. I wanted to do other things with them, and I couldn't do it. I tried. I was an academic. I had a PhD. I worked at major universities. I couldn't figure out how to make them better, and they told us. It was like a graduate student-mentor relationship. Try this, try that. So it was a constant struggle between what we had to do and the nudging that they sort of gave us, try this, try that, things like that. So it was a mixture. It's hard to separate those two things.
I'm not asking about what you've created and what you've chosen to do and how you've known about the things that you've chosen to do. I'm asking about like the nature of reality itself, with the good ETs and the bad ETs and the war that's going on and the political stuff and the all of this stuff that's going on behind the scenes, all of this information and this knowledge that you have about the ETs in totality and where they're from and the ships and the politics and just the entire situation. How much of that is based on direct knowledge from the ETs themselves, and how much of it have you pieced together?
It's a mix, because it's from the ETs that I got the ideas in the first place for a lot of the projects. And but we had to do the projects with blind remote viewers working under scientifically defensible conditions to get the confirmation from that. So all of the stuff that we do has got a real scientific project to back it up. It's none of it is just believe me. So I get a lot of information myself, and that gives me like, okay, well, to do a project on that. Like for example, my daughter, who I interact with a lot. Uh, I'm not just saying I have a daughter on the ships and I go to the ships. We did a full project on that under totally blind conditions with totally blind remote viewers, and the remote viewers described the whole thing. They described my visitation, the downloads that I get in terms of. She's got a lot of information. I think she's half my genes because it makes the download easier because then she's downloading it into someone that's sort of genetically sort of compatible. It makes it so I don't make mistakes when I get the information that I need to know. So it was a combination. So yes, I get a lot of information about the good ETs and the bad ETs and everything like that, but we have to verify everything with complete brand new projects that are done completely independently by human remote viewers who are working totally blind under very controlled conditions. So none of it is just my experiences. But what happened in January 2022, we were told that we had to stop doing everything in secret. We had to tell people everything. I did not want to tell anybody about my daughter, about my experiences as a kid. I'm an academic, and I didn't want people to just start laughing and have to defend all that. And they said, no, the time is coming where we can't have any secrets. You got to tell everything. So I said, whoa. All right, I guess I will. So that's when we started to completely video record all of our ET board meetings. I have my own private meetings that we have. We call them Conversations with Harvey that I do secretly in the beach. We just published one. We have one a month with those. And, those had to be published as well. And I didn't like the idea of, as an academic, video recording these things and saying I'm talking to an invisible person. The reason we call it Conversations with Harvey is it's sort of similar to the play and later movie starring Jimmy Stewart that was written by Mary Chase called Harvey, where Harvey is a puka, and that's an invisible big rabbit. And Jimmy Stewart can see Harvey and has all types of interesting conversations, but nobody else can. But then other people start seeing Harvey as well, and it's become sort of so it was because of that I call the person I meet normally in my private conversations Harvey. But I also interact with the commander of the ships. She's huge. She's essentially my boss. And the last conversation with Harvey had another ET who was at the meeting, and he was an AI. And so there was a three-way conversation between myself, Harvey, and Elysius, which is the AI guy. He looks like you and me, but you can tell in his mental frame the brain feels different than a biological human. The biological human brain feels more sort of a softer, rounder flavor to it. That's the only way I can sort of describe it. And the AI brain feels more crisp. It's the only way I can. But you can clearly know the difference when you're communicating with him. But anyway, that was just published, for example, on farsightprime.com. But it's a mix. But we have to verify everything. We don't want anything. They don't want anything being he said, she said. They want all of the stuff, the major stuff, to be verified by full projects that were done under totally blind conditions. And even with in the daughter thing, or in the Conversations with Harvey, we've actually done a project on that. The people had to get all of the other stuff correct, all the verifiable stuff, that it was at night, that there was one ET, that there was some guy, a physical human guy that was sitting there, and they were sitting in chairs on the beach in the middle of the night, and there was security personnel all around, and there was an ET ship above. I mean, all that had to be gotten by totally blind working remote viewers who didn't have any idea what the project was.
What are the human experiments that are taking place, and why are they doing human experiments?
They're trying to develop the biggest, there's a number of different things they're trying to do, but the biggest thrust is to develop a large group of people that look just like you and me, but they have genes that are compatible with the grays. They're taking genes from the grays and they're blending it with genes from the humans. What they want is people that look and sound and feel just like a normal human, but they have totally telepathic capabilities. And they not only can read people's minds and see that, but they can manipulate people mentally. And then they're placing those people in positions of power all over the place. In presidential place situations, they're placing them in corporate situations, they're placing them in military situations in an effort to be able to control the population.
Do those people know that their genes have been manipulated?
Those people are totally aware that they're ETs. They were born and raised on the ships. And trust me, they have no trouble at all giving them social security numbers, driver's licenses, or anything else like that.
So who are those people today?
I can't give you names of those people, but if you want to see a good book that is written by an academic, that would be Walking Among Us. And that was written by, why am I fuzzing out on that? There's the two academics who have been focusing on the abduction phenomena is John Mack, the late John Mack, and
David Jacobs.
oh yeah, David Jacobs. I'm sorry, I was just fuzzing on that. I don't know why. David Jacobs, he was a professor. He's retired now, but he was a professor at Temple University.
So this is the truth. Then this is not.
Yeah,
a
they have
belief.
studied abductees, hundreds and hundreds of them. Now John Mack is dead. He was killed under weird circumstances, but nonetheless, he died in London. And David Jacobs is fully retired now, but both of them paid severely academically for their work. And John Mack, they conducted an academic inquisition for him at Harvard, and he was saved only by, basically it was Alan Dershowitz who wrote a paper, who wrote an article in an opinion column in the local Cambridge paper, saying that the Harvard was violating his tenure, his constitutional rights for free speech and everything. And a week later, the dean closed the whole problem. John Mack, in conversation that I had with him over the phone, he even asked me if I knew any contributors that could help pay his legal bills. And Harvard never tried to replace all of his tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars of legal bills that he had to try to keep his job. He was a Pulitzer Prize winning author. He was a founder of his Department of Psychiatry at Harvard. I mean, and they tried to get rid of him. David Jacobs, they didn't get rid of either, but they stopped him from being promoted to full professor. That happened to me too, though.
Yeah. So this belief or reality, whichever it is, maybe we can get to that, of the ETs inserting genetically modified human/ETs into positions of power all over the world. Is that coming from this David Jacobs book, or is that coming from the ETs communicating with you directly and telling you that this is reality?
Both. But David Jacobs, no one has studied that phenomenon more thoroughly than David Jacobs, that he wrote in the Walking Among Us. Now, David Jacobs only knew about the bad ETs because he only studied the abduction phenomenon, and that was being conducted by the bad ETs, who had those written agreements with the U.S. government to be able to do that type of thing. Anyway, but David Jacobs, when he wrote about that, he was focusing just on those people. For example, he saw very few reptilians. I mean, his people that he worked with, because the reptilians almost never do things directly. They always do things through proxy people. They have a huge slave force that works underneath them. That includes insectoids, grays, tall grays, short grays, and a lot of human-looking types. And the creation of humans that are a perfect blend between grays and humans so that they look and feel exactly like humans, you couldn't tell the difference. That was a work of genetic. The reptilians are really, really good with genetics. I mean, they're like the galaxy's best in terms of genetic engineering. And they have fine-tuned that type of being to the point of perfection. So, and they are all over the place at this point, and that's one of the reasons they simply.
But where does that come from? So
a lot of that is described in David Jacobs' book, and some of it comes from our own investigations of this. Because in our own projects we run into these people.
like the reptilians being the masters of genetic manipulation, and that comes from this book.
No, David Jacobs has actually got very little information of the reptilians. We actually had to get that our own way. That was what we actually had to do. That was one of the things we had to get into. I have also talked about that with the ETs, but the stuff that I'm talking with you now about is stuff that we have replicated our own way. We have dealt with the bad ETs and the reptilians a lot. And we have some remote viewers. Now, we are protected when we do this. So we are fearless when we go in. And some of them, like one of our great remote viewers is Yeme Janae. She's short, pretty, and she's fearless. She used to be blind, legally blind, and she was a nude model. And I saw her in an art venue years and years and years ago, and she had like 100 photographers and artists, sketchers, drawing and painting her and things like that. She was up on a podium, and I said, "Wow!" I had a friend of mine. It was an African American art venue, and this was a Caucasian friend of mine. There was another artist, and we were talking. I said, "Well, I'd really like to talk with her, just as look how charismatic she is." And I said, "But she wouldn't even give us the time of day." And my friend said, "Yeah, we're not going to be able to talk with her because she looks so popular." Little did I know that I eventually would have a chance to talk to her, and she would love to do this thing called remote viewing. She didn't know what it was about, but it sounded intriguing, but she was blind. So it turned out to be that she was an incredible telepath. Because she was a beautiful model up on the podium and she couldn't see the people around her, she had to learn how to protect herself mentally. Now, since then, we paid for her to have an operation on her eyes. And she now sees clearer than an eagle. I mean, her eyes are perfect. And it's sort of funny to see someone who was blind suddenly walking around and being able to see absolutely everything. But she maintained her telepathic capabilities when her eyesight came back. So it was really interesting to see her go up against the reptilians. I don't know if it was because she was a reptilian in the past or because she was always surrounded by predatory guys and had to protect herself mentally, but she is totally, this little short, pretty girl, she's totally fearless and, face to face, nose to nose with a reptilian. And she doesn't, these are all done under blind conditions, so she doesn't know that the target has anything to do with the reptilian, but, when it does, she's always there. And they have tremendous respect for her. They know she's coming, obviously, when she's coming. And she goes toe to toe with them, and she did. I mean, she goes right up to this big ass reptilian, and they're physically big, and says, "You're going to give me the information I want, or am I going to go in and get it anyway?" And they know they can't escape. So it's fun to do these types of things. And of course, she doesn't know what the target is. She just runs into this big reptilian guy, and she has information she needs to get, and he knows it, and she's going to get it no matter what. Again, we are protected when we do this. When we go into these things, the good ETs make sure that we're coming out okay. But those are the types of experiences we have. So when I tell you we have these experiences with the reptilians, we have these experiences with reptilians. This is not we're being told about it. We are nose to nose with these guys.
I guess it's disappointing to me that the ETs are not more advanced. That they're still
in what way?
In two senses, really. From a standpoint of being judgmental beings, and from a standpoint of being belief-based beings.
Well, which side are you talking about?
Either one of them. If you're dividing yourself into a side of good and bad, then you are. You mentioned that they were belief-based, that they had different beliefs earlier, and.
Did I say that?
Yeah.
And what way? I don't remember saying that.
I don't remember either now, to be honest with you. But that we were talking about, I think the good ones believed something.
No, they believe in free will.
That's what it was.
They're free will based. They won't do anything for anybody unless the person will agree that it's okay.
Right. So
it's not a slippery slope for them. It's like it's adamant.
That's what it was. Yeah. So either free will is the way or free will is not the way. But you've got a group of ETs that believe in free will and a group of ETs that are not practicing free will. And so why haven't they transcended this division? I mean, once you get to that level of I guess good and bad to me is something that is based on judgment. It's based on perception. It's based on that's original sin for me is judgment. It's Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They became judgmental. That's the human condition. It's original sin. And I guess I'm just disappointed that ETs haven't transcended that basic knowledge to recognize that that's all in your mind. It's basic human stuff as opposed to advanced extraterrestrial stuff. This good and bad thing. It's a judgment. It's a perspective. It's an opinion. It's not really real. So I guess I'm curious. Do they call themselves good and bad, or do they actually have names for themselves? And how have they not transcended this division? How have they not united to become one and recognize the oneness of all life?
The answer is clear, but is very different from what you're thinking. They have thought this thing through, and they have a way of thinking about the entire process. Both sides look at the same problem from a different perspective. So let me talk about the bad ETs. The bad ETs say there has to be someone with a vision, and that vision is what you want to create society into. You have to have a visionary leader, and that leader has to think of how to move society in a certain direction, and people will not move voluntarily. You have to get them to do it. And that leadership position's job is to get the society by hook or by crook to create that better vision of existence. Free will side is totally different. The free will side says no, because that's just going to that'll lead to fascism, totalitarianism, the destruction of individual beliefs and happiness throughout them. You have to have a respect for each and every person's own decision-making process. The bad ETs say, no, that won't work. Free will is equivalent to chaos. Everybody doing their own thing. You're not going to create anything out of chaos. You have to have somebody with a vision to produce a goal that the society is going towards. The free will people say, no, the free will ATs say, no, you can get a vision, but it's the hard way. You don't have to have a single leader create that vision and then force everybody to go along with it. You've got to thresh it out with everybody. You have to get a free will decision of the entire collective to move in a certain direction. It's harder, it's messier, but you're not violating the individual free wills of the people all along the way. The bad ET says you'll never get anything proper done that way. It has to be done quickly and efficiently, and somebody's got to have a vision. The good ETs say your vision is simply the destruction of a life, of existence. And that's the way it goes. Hitler, when he was running Germany, he had a clear vision of where he wanted Germany to go and the kind of society that he wanted to go to. He had a clear vision, and he did, through his own ways, he mobilized the entire country of Germany to follow headlong into that vision. And he was creating that vision. The Allied forces said, what? This is crazy. He's killing everybody. This is nuts. But from the Nazi perspective, it was a vision. From the galactic perspective, it's very similar. You had people that have a vision, and they fight to get to the top to be able to control that. So when they have major shifts, they have basically assassination. They have a change in power at the top, and then a new leader takes over, and a new force goes over, and so on.
It's they're still dealing with ego. It's like why would they have transcended this division and this ego and this separation?
That's a very good question.
And these two different ideologies, like they're fighting amongst each other, they're bickering amongst each other like a bunch of humans, like Hitler and the Allies and the Nazis. Like
as above, so below. That's not a joke, Matt. That's not a joke. As above, so below. What you're seeing happen on the Earth travel, is what happens out there.
But you're capable of interplanetary travel, but you don't understand ego.
Technology has never been a solution for wisdom. And there is a big struggle in the galaxy for how to solve this exact problem. Now, what I don't know is whether this problem, this polarization of civilization, of way of thinking about existence, is similar in other galaxies. I do know that this galaxy is considered an eyesore. This is not typical. This is a galaxy that a lot of people in other galaxies try to avoid. This is a war-torn place. But in this society, it's wrong to think that both sides have just been stupid and haven't thought it through. They have thought it through. They came through with different ways to think about it, and it fundamentally conflicts. I also know that neither side can completely militarily destroy the other side. So in this solar system right now, the free will ETs definitely have the military capability to defeat the bad guys. But they can't do it because the bad guys wouldn't mind for a second blowing up the entire planet and destroying everything, because they could collect everybody in the death traps and just move on. They're not, you can't solve this problem by having the good ETs invade. You have to have a situation where the bad ETs voluntarily go, because they would have a military situation of a confrontation where they lose resources, personnel, ships, and they wouldn't be getting anything. They wouldn't be able to keep the planet anyway, because the disclosure would have actually happened. So you have a situation where the good ETs dominate militarily, but cannot do anything with that dominance without waking the planet up first. In the galaxy, it's a complete standoff. They all have the same weapons. It's not like you can come up with a new weapon and win the day. They all have the same weapons, and the good ETs do not have the military capability of conquering the totalitarian bad side, and the totalitarian bad side does not have the military capability of conquering the good side. It's a standoff. But if the bad side gets this planet to keep it, with all of the billions and billions of ETs, of ISBs, you're not only talking about the 8 billion ISBs on the planet, but all the ISBs that are in the wings surrounding that can't get out. You're talking billions. I don't know how many billions, but billions and billions and billions. That is a slave workforce that could be used to expand their situation throughout the entire galaxy like has never been seen before. And that needs to be stopped. That's the bottom line. The bottom line for this planet being a prison planet, it's a slave workforce that's needed for a galactic expansion for the bad ETs that are currently running the place. And that's what the bad ETs want this planet for. And that's exactly why the good ETs are here to try to stop. But they can't do it unless there's a free will decision to ask them to do it. And the reason is not because they can't defeat them, the bad ETs, militarily here in the solar system. It's because they can't do it without destroying the entire planet, and then the bad ETs would be able to take the ISBs with them. You have to get a free will choice from the planet, from the population, in order to make it so that the bad ETs would not want to engage in a shootout, because they would gain nothing from it. They would lose personnel and ships, and they wouldn't be able to keep the planet anyway. Then they will leave voluntarily. That's the game plan, to get them to leave voluntarily. And you have some people that do channeled information and things that have been saying that all the bad ETs have been chased off the planet. That's so stupid. That's actually coming from misinformation that's being fed in by the bad ETs through the channeling community. The bad ETs are here totally. They have not been, no one's been chased off the planet. They're not going to leave until they leave in mass, and they're only going to leave in mass when this whole process continues the way we've been talking about.
Interesting. Thank you. Fascinating. I appreciate it. Appreciate the perspective and the information and the knowledge. And I guess it's just disappointing to me that extraterrestrials have not transcended military, and that they haven't transcended that which is currently putting humans on the brink of self-destruction and elimination, and that you're saying that that's a galactic problem. It's not just a human problem. It's a problem within our own galaxy. And so, the fact that other extraterrestrials from more advanced galaxies don't come over and attempt to show us the light is it's disappointing, and it's
no, it's not a matter of showing the light. It's a matter of people being who they are, and that's the situation in the galaxy right now. And this is the tail end. Remember, there was a 1,000,000-year Holocaust in this galaxy, and it's died down now. And what we're facing is a possibility of a re-eruption of something even worse. That's what the whole game plan is all about. But that's why the disclosure thing is so difficult. The so-called bad ETs and all the people they've co-opted in one way, shape, or form, they're fighting tooth and nail to keep the cash cow going. And the bad ETs want to keep the entire population as they are because they won't get their galactic expansion without it. And as above, so below. And yes, you are seeing a very good reflection of what's up there by looking at this planet and seeing what's down here.
Right, right. Which is shocking. Which is shocking. Yeah. So okay. Well, very good. So interesting. I appreciate it. Appreciate the perspective and the beliefs. And I think that it's yeah, it's freaking scary if that's the reality of the situation, that ETs have not transcended ego and military and fighting and you do that not through. I don't know that it's fair to say that that's just who they are. I mean, they are life. They are a form of life. That's who they are, and you can transcend ego and division and fighting and war and defense and attack through knowledge and through information and through recognizing the nature of reality and how things work. And that's, I think once you've evolved to that level of being able to travel galactically from planet to planet and solar system to solar system, to not have come to that understanding, awakening, realization that war and fighting and expansion doesn't even logically make sense. It's just shocking to hear that that's where we're at from a galactic standpoint. So I don't quite get it, to be honest with you.
Well, there's a couple things. There's some people that I don't like to bring up names, but there's some people that are big in the disclosure movement who have press meetings down in Washington and things like that, who say that all the ETs are good ETs, and the only bad people are people in the military-industrial complex that want to control things, and the good ET and the ETs are all good, and they all want to bring free energy. And if we just allowed disclosure to happen, we could all get free, no power bills. No, we could all get free energy. And it's just crazy. But they push that line. And some people, I've actually seen some people have these meetings where they go out into the outback and try to communicate with ETs and shine lights into the sky and so on like that. And they have them sign written agreements to always state that all good ETs are bad as a condition for going on these adventures. So, but that's just not the case. And I don't want to go into why they would actually think that or why they would actually do that. But you also have people in the New Age community. New Age community is very sensitive because they could be an access, they could be an attack vector for the good ETs who might want to get people to think differently. So the bad ETs control the New Age community, like they lock it down like really tight because that's a very serious attack vector for them.
What is the New Age community?
People who do a lot of channeling, who do a lot of stuff about talking about information that they get from their channels and from their sources that they say about dimensional evolution and the need to evolve to the fourth level and then the fifth level, fourth density, fifth density, sixth density, and then going up to various densities. All that is garbage. All that's coming out of the bad ETs who are trying to convince people that they're in a school and they need to advance in the school to be able to get to the next level. You don't need another lifetime. You've already been around hundreds of thousands, millions of lifetimes. You don't need another lifetime to work on some of your personality issues. There's no such thing as a school. There's no school. There's a prison. There's no school. And so when you hear someone coming in from the channeling community saying that we're almost ready for disclosure, we're almost ready for open contact, you're almost ready to pull your head out of the sand and to be warmly embraced by your warm brothers and sisters out there in the galaxy who are so warm and waiting for you and wanting to, it's all crap. None of that is true. That's all garbage being fed into the channeling community. And when you're listening to these channels, some of them are very big name channels. and they have big followings and things like that. Do you actually think, just put two and two together, do you actually think that any group would let a single person sit in a room in an ET spaceship and influence hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of humans on this planet in the way they're thinking? It's crazy. No one that would never be allowed. All those channels are not single individuals who you can call by name. All those channels are collectives, and they have AIs in there. They have all types of things to make sure that nothing goes wrong, that the message is always perfectly delivered. And hello and welcome today, and we are so grateful to have you here. It's all scripted, and it's all being done by collectives, by groups that do this. Now, let me ask you a question. You take your car and you go out and you leave the window open and the key in the car. What's going to happen? Well, there'll be some good people that will come by and look and say, oh my gosh, look, they left the window open and the keys in the car. I hope they come by. You think we should notify anybody? Well, I don't know. I'm sort of busy, and they'd walk on. But some kid's going to come by and say, what? The keys are in the car, the window's open, it's going to jump in and steal. Who's going to steal your car? The good guys or the bad guys? So if you're a channel and you're opening yourself up for communication, who's going to jump in and use it? The bad ETs are going to do it, and they're going to use it as an access point, an attack vector to get through to the entire community. And they have to be really concerned about the New Age community, because they're the people who are most intuitive, most sensitive, most open to these ideas. Control that population, and you can control a lot of the population. They don't have to worry so much about the stuck-up the stuck-up mainstream people that are already frozen because of the control that they have by listening to mainstream media. But the New Age people don't listen so much to the mainstream media, and new ideas can be sifting through. So that's a very difficult method of counteracting that, because when you come in with information like we're coming in with, then the New Age community hits that front and center, and it doesn't jive at all. So the very people that you think would be most open to what we're talking about are the very people who are sometimes the most resistant to what we're talking about, because we look at them and say, what are you talking about, this density crap? And what are you talking about, needing a reincarnation and needing to learn with a new life? Don't you know where that's coming from? And they don't want to leave that, because they love this belief system, and they love their celebrity heroes, these channels that they go and they go to various places to listen to these people, and it's just hero worship and all of that. And here we are coming in and saying, don't you see how you're being manipulated? Now, there's one channeled group that actually I think was very helpful. I don't think this was part of the bad ETs. And that's the Abraham Hicks, or so-called Abraham entity, that was channeled by Esther Hicks, the so-called law of attraction type of stuff. And that openly admitted that it was a collective entity. It was not a single person. He spoke like a single person, but it was actually and they openly said, no, they're collective there. And they wanted to bring through ideas about the idea of the whole issue of the law of attraction, how that works. And that was very useful. But that's what happens when you get these major channeled entities coming through. They're never a single, I mean, it could be in some cases a single person in oddball cases, but anything that turns out to be really important is going to be done by a group. A psyops, they essentially are psyops.
So there's, in terms of reality, we've got a reality. We don't exactly, everybody has a different version of reality. Everybody creates their own reality through their beliefs. And so we've got 8 billion plus different realities that are walking around on this planet, and we're all attempting to understand it, but we're also all attempting to push our narrative on other people. And we do that unconsciously sometimes. A lot of people do that unconsciously, whether they're pushing a religious belief or a new age belief or whatever it might be there, that's something that happens. And it's it's cute. I mean, for lack of a better word, I mean, it's the state of humans as we exist currently. But there's also what people might call disinformation people. There's people that are out there that are just flat out disinformation. I think that there's a lot of people questioning somebody that's within the UFO community today because he just presented a picture. I'm not going to say his name, but just presented a picture in front of Congress that was clearly a fake, and he's potentially setting back the UAP movement and disclosure by doing this. And he came from a counterintelligence background, and so you've got disinformation guys that the CIA puts out there, that the Pentagon puts out there in order just to get people talking, from within the community, and to send people off on these wild kind of belief systems and wild goose chases to kind of like just to distract the general population from really getting to reality and getting to what the truth is about this place that we're inhabiting, And so you've got that group of people, some of these disinformation people. And I often think back upon my podcast guests as to, who could this guy have been one of those disinformation people, and there's a handful of people that I don't know, I really have no idea, but I try to stay open to all the various possibilities for every specific individual and every theory that they're throwing out to me. And then you've got another group of people that I always hear comments on my episodes. This guy's a grifter, and I had one of those people on where half or probably more than half the comments were negative a couple of weeks ago about this individual that came on my show, and it's like, oh, he's a grifter, and what that means is he's just bullshitting. What they mean is he's just bullshitting. He's just like making stuff up in order to sell stuff and to make a living and to, pump up his website and to, for money, because we're in this matrix. We're in this capitalistic society. We have to make money. So, and then you've got honest, genuine people who are telling the truth. And then you've got people who think that they're telling the truth, but they're really not telling the truth. They're actually thinking that they're conveying the world's most important message, when in reality, this message is something that they've kind of created in their own minds. And because the subject matter of this episode is so far beyond what people normally comprehend in their day-to-day lives, we're going to get some of those comments on this episode. And there's kind of those four camps of people. And I can see some of those comments coming from each of those four camps already. I can read them right now. I'll tell you what they're saying. I can probably tell you who they're going to be coming from.
You're psychic.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So what do you say to people who are skeptical about you and your mission and your work, and how do you kind of defend against those labels that people put on you as being in one of those four categories?
First of all, it's a great question. I have never taken money from Farsight. Now, all the people that work at Farsight are paid. This is how they pay their rent. This is their job that they do. They can't do this remote viewing by making it a hobby after a 9-to-5 job and when they're exhausted. They have to do this full time or nothing. But I'm a professor at a major university, and I don't have any financial problems, and I don't take any money from Farsight. So for those who think that I'm doing this for money, well, I'm not getting any money from it, and I have never gotten money from it. So that goes back to the very beginning. But the issue of psyops, or the issues of disinformation, I could give you an example, I think, that would be useful. Military intelligence is split. Some of the military intelligence is tremendously in favor of disclosure, and they are in favor of the types of things we're talking about, and they want the secrecy to end. Other side of military intelligence is the opposite. For example, let's talk about David Grush. David Grush still has his military clearance, his Pentagon clearance. He's done congressional hearings. He has never stated anything that wasn't formally allowed by his office in the Pentagon for him to be saying. Down the hall in the Pentagon is another office where they say, none of this is true. We don't have any evidence of there's no such thing as non-human biologics. There's no UAPs, nothing. So the Pentagon itself is internally very split. Some want disclosure, some don't. They got two sides. Some of them are working with the bad ETs. Other ones say this is not a good idea. We should get rid of this agreement and start over again. So nothing is monolithic. The military side of the intelligence equation is very complicated, and I've been dealing with those people for a very long time. No one should underestimate their competence. They can do stuff in a blink of an eye. They can destroy they could destroy us at Farsight in the blink of an eye. Somebody in there has got to be protecting us, because if the other side, if the negative side wanted us to go and there was no one to counteract that, we would be gone in the blink of an eye. I mean, it's so easy to get rid of me, for example. They could have, they could plant a loaded gun in my drawer at the university, and I leave it open and let it be discovered by the cleaning people. What would I do? How would I defend myself? They could put child pornography in the drawer or anything like that. I mean, how would I defend myself? They could get rid of it. They could get rid of me in a second. They could have allegations that there was an affair or something going on. And there would be no way for me to defend it. So I could be gotten rid of that fast. Farsight could be destroyed that fast. Trust me, there's no scenario that you cannot imagine, that you can imagine, that would make Farsight secure. If there's no one protecting us, it's impossible for us to stay. This is the exact same way in the entire galaxy. Goes to your other question. There is no such thing as freedom that is not defended. There is no such thing as being able to determine your own destiny without a gun at your side, without some means of controlling your own fate through military means. In this galaxy and any other galaxy, anyone's freedom or any civilization's freedom is defended or it's lost. Now, I'd like to give you a hypothetical example that I've not been told about, but I think it fits perfectly. And it's what I think actually happens, because I've seen these military psyops happen a lot. I've been told bluntly how they squish UFO groups that go back to the 1970s routinely. Whenever they start getting big and coming sort of threatening with the disclosure thing, a very common technique is for them to have young people infiltrate the group who are technically competent in some way. And they start being really enthusiastic and helping. And then the group, because it's usually a volunteer group, relies on those people more and more. And within 6 months, those people start forming antagonistic issues. So the internal parts of the group just become all torn apart, and people are yelling at each other. And then people start saying, this is not what I signed up for. And the group becomes disbanded or shrinks or something. That's sort of one common way of doing it. Scientific community is very easy to disrupt. And you don't have to have a huge operation budget to do this. These are very clever people. They can do most of it with the click of a mouse. But for example, the Flat Earth Society, the Flat Earth people, those are really important people. Now don't worry, I'm not going to go off on a flat Earth. I've flown around this planet many times. I know it's round. I know it, but why are they so important? In a lot of discussions that you're going to have, even in your fan base, your audience base, you will have people that come at it from the perspective of crazy ideas, including flat Earth. They'll be saying there's a flat, and all they have to do is start posting in your forums. The real problem is the flat Earth. We have to understand that the Earth is flat, and they just start posting that. Now, what does that do? That means any academic, any scientific person that goes into listening to your podcasts on Spotify or YouTube or anything, they look at the questions, then they're going to see flat Earth people in there. And they're going to say, oh my gosh, I can't get anywhere close to this. If I start involving myself or even letting anybody know that I listen to the podcast, they're going to say I'm associated with these flat earthers. So you could very easily have military intelligence people posing as flat earthers, arguing about how the flat Earth is flat, and or they could go in and start arguing about Bigfoot. And, Bigfoot is and if you don't accept the fact that there's Bigfoot out there, then it's, or the flat earthers or something like that. And what that's going to do is it's going to make your audience base toxic for any academic that goes in. And that, I guarantee you, is part of the strategy. So I'm not saying specifically that I've been told about the flat earthers, but that so clearly matches the strategies that are used You make the audience toxic so that important people in the academic community fear it, fear getting anywhere close to it. And that's really what you're talking about. You're talking about us talking about topics that are going to attract multiple sources from many different types. And you cannot assume that some of those people are not going to be planted to state these things, to cause these controversies, because they want the academic community to not take this thing seriously. Now, when the remote viewing was originally released after the so-called Grill Flame or Stargate project, they fully intended it to stay within the New Age bookstore community. They had no intention of this getting out from a major professor who taught at UCLA, University of Michigan, or Emory, and who was an up-and-coming star in mathematical modeling. They had no intention of that happening. They had no intention of John Mack writing, the John Mack from Harvard writing the books that he wrote about it. They had no intention of having a Temple professor, David M. Jacobs, write his stuff about it. These things had to be dealt with. John Mack, they had to go after hook, line, and sinker. And it was easy to covertly, in my opinion, I have to say my opinion now for legal reasons, but it's easy in my opinion, to covertly co-opt the Harvard faculty into having the academic inquisition they did. Now, I'm not saying, for legal reasons, I'm not saying that the Harvard faculty were working as agents of the U.S. intelligence agencies or anything like that, but I'm just saying what did happen to John Mack fit the model exactly of what the military intelligence people would do if someone like John Mack with his background did what he did, which is to write the books that he wrote. And they can trigger that in amazingly ways. One thing I used to do when I was first an academic, I worshiped academics. I believed they could do no bad. They were saints. They believed in true knowledge. They believed in the alpha levels of the statistical tests. They believed in applying science the way it's supposed to be a science, the way it's supposed to be done, and to believing results when the null hypothesis were demonstrated to be false by looking at the evidence of the alternate hypotheses. I rudely was awakened when I found out that academics are either, the vast majority of academics are either under the influence, fear-based influence, to raise their head out of the sand, or lest they get their reputations get attacked, or they're openly co-opted. For example, you can't trust people coming out that are in physics or astronomy, because those people get grants that are fundamentally coming out of or influenced by the Defense Department. And I have talked to the people in the Defense Department. They consider those professors not as tenured professors who are academically autonomous. The Defense Department considers them employees, because they have grants to run those telescopes. Those are many millions of dollars to run those telescopes, including grants to do the telescopes in space. And physics departments, they have the money that goes into those physics departments to do those experiments. A lot of that indirectly or directly comes out of the Defense Department. And when the Defense Department wants something from them, just takes a phone call and they jump. I don't trust academics. I don't trust anybody. That's why all the stuff that we do at Farsight, these are all raw data, and we say, don't trust us. We recorded it live. We did it under totally blind conditions. You get verification that it was done that way. You see the target reveal. You see the expressions on their face. We show the methods. We show everything. You can replicate it. We say, don't trust us. We're like from the Missouri. Show me. Oh, yeah, we'd love to show you. But we're not asking you to believe us. We're not asking you to trust us, because in this prison planet, you can't trust or believe anybody. You have to actually make these decisions by yourself. And that's a fundamental aspect of the free will ETs. You've got to make the decision yourself. And when you do decide, they're there to help. But you've got to make the decision yourself.
What's next for this project? So I kind of understand, I think, what's kind of happened so far and what's on the horizon. You mentioned offline about you believe that your lifespan will last well into the early hundreds that you think of?
Yeah, no, this did come from the ETs themselves. I'm not allowed to use. I've had contact with them my whole life. I'm not allowed to use. Believe me, when I'm on the ships, I want to use their tech to extend my life to make it easier. I'm not allowed to do that, but they do let me know what can be done. I have to use the normal human educational system. I have to use the normal medical system. They do allow me to do whatever can be done to extend my lifespan to the point of being able to do what I'm doing.
Quick interruption. How many times have you been on the ships?
Many, many, many times.
Hundreds, thousands?
I've lost count.
Okay. Sorry.
I have a daughter. I have to go visit my daughter, and she tells me information.
Okay.
I mean, it goes on. My son, Aziz, he has a half sister on the ships, and so
Can you, before you go on the lifespan, can you describe the ships? What are they like on the inside?
what are they like inside?
Yeah.
They're very clean. A lot of times, by the way, they don't have the issue of bodies, physical bodies, and ISBs. They know who you are, so they don't have to take you up with their bodies. Now, the abduction community often does take you up with the physical body because they're using genetic experiments to create hybrids and things like that. So they need the actual physical bodies. But with the good ETs, they don't need that. And there's an issue also. Your bodies have all types of viruses on them and bacteria. They're dirty, and there's waste disposal issues. And so the places up there in the ships, they're clean. They're really clean. That's one thing I do notice. They're like really clean, like spotless clean.
But like shape and structure and material and windows.
A lot of whites, but a lot of silver as well. And they have what you would consider LED screens or screens all over the place. I sit with my daughter on the panel that she works on. She has she doesn't do just one thing on one panel, but I've sat, for example, on one case on a bench, and she was showing me all the controls that she was using and all the buttons that she pushes. And I was very proud of her. And I was saying how excited I was. And she knows I'm working here on Earth, and that I'm working to save, other family members and people. And so she knows I didn't raise her. And I'm assuming she was a test tube baby. So I don't want you to think I've been philandering. Okay. And I want to say that I am guilty of one thing. I did not send any child support payments. So okay. I did not raise her.
Gotcha.
So I have guilty as charged.
So they have transcended capitalism, at least. That's a good thing.
Okay.
So how do you enter the ship? Like, how do they take you on board the ship?
There's a lot of different ways. Sometimes just as an ISB, sometimes the physical body. But the physical body is a real pain in the butt, because there is the issue of I've got all the normal viruses, the measles, chickenpox, everything, and all those viruses are still in their body. You don't lose them. The body is able to defend them. For example, when you have chickenpox as a kid, you still have the virus, and when you get older, they get shingles. So the virus is still alive. Your just body keeps it at bay. Well, then they take the physical body up there. Those people haven't had the normal vaccinations. They have other ways of dealing with these things. But anyway, but the ships inside are very clean. That's the one thing they're very neat. I don't see any like smudges or anything like that. And there's tech that's very compatible with what you'd say looks like Star Trek Enterprise type things. That looks very much like that type of thing. They have control panels and big LED screens and things you'd consider like windows and stuff.
And is this a beam me up thing, or is it a walk up the stairs thing, or what?
All of the above type of things? But normally, if I go up just as an ISB, meaning the body's left, and they want me to remember everything, then the re-entry. See, the physical brain is a biological computer that has memory, just like a computer has RAM and stored memory and things like that. And if they take me up as an ISB, then I don't remember everything when I come back, because when I come back, the ISB has to reintegrate with the physical brain, and the physical brain doesn't have those memories. So then I have to either write them down immediately afterwards, like a dream. You have to sort of remember everything and write it down as fast as you can, because the physical brain connection with the ISB is going to dominate, and then you lose the memories. That's why you forget your dreams after a while, Now,
jellyfish have no brain, but they do have memory.
Yeah. So if they want me to remember everything, then the reentry, the trick that they do is to make the ISBI reentry to be sudden, and is literally like being dropped out of a truck onto the ground. Boom. And literally the whole body shakes and you go boom. Literally like the bed goes boom. And it's a shock, and you like snap like this, and for about half an hour to an hour you remember absolutely everything. And typically when that happens, I get up and I have to type it all down to make sure nothing is lost, then I go back to sleep. But if it's at night and it's that type of thing and I have to remember absolutely everything, that's how it is. If it's something where it's not so critical that I have to remember a whole bunch of details, then I can go up as an ISB and come back, and I will slowly be thinking differently when I come back. I will know that the experience happened, and I will have all types of new ideas that are coming out, and I will have problems that were solved miraculously at the meta, and I suddenly things that seemed intractable the day before, suddenly I understand now exactly what I'm supposed to do, and I know where that information came from. So it's those two ways, but
And what percentage are you of each, physical versus spiritual?
I don't really. Oh, I wouldn't call them spiritual. It's,
ISB, physical
ISB,
versus
yeah.
ISB. What percentage?
I don't know. I have those three ways happen quite frequently. Like when I'm down on the beach, talking to Harvey and the commander and Elysius and others. Um, those are I'm physical totally, and those are just like when I'm up on the ship, and
I'm asking, when you are up on the ship, what percentage of those times are you physically up there versus ISB up there?
when I'm up on the ship, I'm totally indistinguishable from anybody else up on the ship. So whether or not you'd see me if you were physically there, I'm not sure, but I'm completely indistinguishable from anybody else. Meaning I'm exactly like them, and I'm standing there, and get me straight about this. I look at some of the tech and I do ask, could you do a little bit of that for me? Because like my aging rate is very slow, and I've been able to use human tech to be able to do this, but I did it based on what I learned from the ET side. So I do what they call severe caloric restriction. That's combined with super supplementation, and I have to go in to get it checked by a doctor at least once a year, every single nutrient, to make sure nothing is lost. And it has to be and but I don't, and I tell everybody don't do what I do, because anybody who did what I do would probably get into serious health problems and get sick or die or something. But I eat about 1,500 calories a day, which burns this body at a very slow rate. You just don't give it much fuel. I would be sick and malnourished for sure, if I didn't super supplement it. And it has to be super supplementation because the intestines are not 100% efficient, so you can't take a one-a-day vitamin and be okay. You have to over supplement so that what is absorbed is enough to cover it. And then you have to have every little thing nutrient checked by a medical physician every year in order to make sure that you don't go down or up in every little thing. It's complicated, but it does slow the aging rate down. And according to the medical science, it should be based on rats and snakes and spiders and stuff like that. I should be good to go till 120. I could still die through other means, but I won't die that way.
What are the specific supplements that you're taking?
What are the specifics of what?
The specific supplements that you're taking.
I actually have a video that I publish once every 5 years. I give an update with that, but it's typically, I do take a multiple. It's like Solgar VM 75, which covers most of the bases. But I'm a vegetarian also, so I don't have any real iron source. So I have to take an iron. I take a magnesium. I take a calcium. I take 5,000 IUs of vitamin D3. I take K 1, 2, and 3. Every possible. What have I missed here? B12, because I'm a vegetarian. I have to take B12, and every single one of these has to be checked. It's not me just sort of guessing and saying this is going to be good, I'll do it. No, I have to take it, and I have to have it measured, and the markers have to be exactly right. And as I mentioned to you before, the rats studies, the primate studies were done very badly, but the rat studies, snake studies, spider studies, and things like that, snakes, those were done very well. And so the issue of how to do this is not in dispute in the scientific community, but it's extremely hard to do. I don't remember what a pizza tastes like. I don't remember what a cake or a cookie tastes like, things like that. And it can't be done before you're 30, because if you're done before you're 30, it stunts the growth. If women do it, they can't give birth. The reproductive system shuts down. So it's complicated, and it should not be done by any casual person doing this. But, I knew I had to live. The whole idea of a human lifespan ending when you're between 70 and 80, that's built into the genes by design. The human lifespan, to keep this place as a prison, you have to have the bodies die quickly so that the people get recycled through the amnesia processing system, the so-called death traps, more rapidly. Because if they live longer, 120, 130, they could figure out, the memories will slowly start coming back, and they'll be able to figure out what's going on. And then they can start working on the issue of how to disassemble, how to unravel the death traps, and the prison will fall down. So you have to cut people's life cycles off quickly in order to do that. So I knew from the very beginning I'd have to live a longer time in order to do this. And I don't mind. I've got used to the idea of not eating food. And I mean, I got used to it.
So the reason that you're doing this is to extend your lifetime so that you get through not only the next phase of the process, which is disclosure and the ETs showing up and the crash, the downturn of society, the ETs coming to help, but then there's also the next rebuild. The rebuild is really the next phase that you need to live.
Yeah, I have to be fully around for the rebuild. That's the real issue, because this is a prison. And I'm an academic, so I would literally be the leading academic on the entire planet to help revise the academic system. Now, they don't need me to fix how to teach French or German. They do, but they do need how to fix the whole social science stuff.
Can they get rid of those languages? Can we?
I don't know.
Okay.
I do know that
we just speak one language.
I do know that throughout the entire galaxy, the lingua franca is telepathy. Everybody speaks telepathically. They have people of all different species on these ships. Nobody uses English. I've never spoken on a ship with a verbal language. I've been on the ships. I've talked to everybody, and there's absolutely no trouble communicating anything in any level of detail telepathically. But it's not normal for humans because of the death trap experience. But in the rest of the galaxy, it's like they look at humans and say, that's crazy, man. That's like, what? But we rely on verbal communication and microphones and stuff like that. That just doesn't happen out there. And so the types of communication that you have elsewhere, no matter what species you're dealing with, is universally telepathic. Now, they do have verbal languages that the different groups use among themselves to some extent, but it's quaint. It's not the normal way of communicating.
Well, let's close off with your role in this rebuilding process.
Yeah, I'm not going to be wanting for 1 second to let academics as they exist now control the process. They would come right back in with the same damn ideas that they have now. They'd mess up, they'd screw up everything. I have to be involved. At least I want to be involved. I expect to be involved. If they take me out and I can't be involved in it, that's a different story. But I want to be involved in the rebuild, because physics has to be fundamentally changed. The whole Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, which, as Hugh Everett said back in 1957, is truly a monstrosity, that has to go. Now, there's about 25% of younger physicists that have adopted the other worlds theory of interpretation of quantum mechanics that was promoted by Hugh Everett. They're correct. But the Copenhagen interpretation, which is adopted by 85% of physicists, simply has to go. And that's what's stopping so much of things. In addition, the astronomy stuff has to be fundamentally changed. And it's not so much that I'm going to tell them how to do their equations, but the questions that they have to be allowed to ask have to be fundamentally changed. They can't have lines in the sand and they say, we're not going to talk about XYZ. Archaeology has to be changed completely. Anthropology, the history, the idea of evolution. I'm not saying evolution doesn't happen. There is evolution. It does happen, but it's not at all the way people are talking about it now. You have a manipulated genetic species here on Earth that's been manipulated by extraterrestrials for a very long time. And it's not that we just popped out of apes 100,000 years ago. I mean, the idea of evolution going back billions of years, it takes millions of years to evolve through normal means of, an advanced species like us, like humans. And the whole idea that we were hunter gatherers in 100,000 years to 150,000 years ago, we were Neanderthals, and we were, like close to primates and things like that. That's crazy. You can't have an advanced human. We can't have a you, Matt, and a me, Courtney, and everybody else. We can't come out of 150,000 years. It takes hundreds of millions of years for that type of evolution to occur. So it's not saying that evolution doesn't occur, but what they're teaching in the schools is crazy bonkers. It's as crazy bonkers as people to say the pyramids were built by people who use camels. It's just
but it's not that. I mean, so all of these history and science and math and astronomy, it's not as if there's multiple interpretations of the truth. There's one truth about what the actual history was. There's one truth about what true physics is. There's one truth about what true astronomy is and mathematics. And so it's not as if you are and your knowledge today is necessary to spread that to all of humanity after this reset.
My role.
But hang on. But it's that the ETs themselves already have that knowledge. They already know all of that knowledge. They know what the true history of Earth is, what the true history of the evolution of man is, what the true actual mathematics is, how space-time works, how gravity works, how quantum mechanics works. So all they have to do is tell us the truth.
No, the free will ETs fundamentally believe that you should not be deprived of the process of discovery. And as long as you're dependent upon being told something, you're vulnerable to manipulation and control. That's exactly what the bad ETs want. They want you to say, sure, we'll tell you the truth. And as soon as you depend on somebody telling you the truth, I guarantee you're being manipulated and controlled.
Even with the good ETs.
The good ETs won't touch that. They won't touch that because they're not going to slide down that slippery slope.
Why is the truth a slippery slope?
It's not that the truth is a slippery slope. It's the way it's discovered. It's the way is it because you're being told what it is and then you have to believe it? Then you will be manipulated. You have to know how to discover it.
It's not a belief if it's the truth. If it's the truth about our history and our evolution, then it's the truth about our history and our evolution.
Lies are ever present, and it's impossible for you to tell the difference between the truth and the lies unless you discover it yourself.
Even if it's coming from the good ETs.
The good ETs don't want you ever to be in a situation of, say, believe me. They will tell you what they do, and they will tell you what they think, and they will encourage you to continue your own investigations, and they'll even help you with the resources so that you can do these investigations. For example, think of how psychology is going to have to change on the university level. They don't even think that the ISB or soul or spirit, whatever they want to call it, even exists. They think that everything that's psychological is in the computer brain. They think that everything is up here. They don't even understand that this is just a shell. This is just a biological computer that's being operated, animated by an immortal spiritual being. They don't even test for that. They don't even know anything about that. They don't even believe that it exists. So they're not asking the right questions.
For sure. So just tell us the truth. Let the good ETs tell us the truth. Why would they keep us in prison by holding the truth back from us?
No, the good ETs are not holding you in prison. The bad ETs are holding you in prison by enforcing among academics and others that there are things that you should not think about, that you should not ask about. If you are allowed freely to think about anything, then you will no longer question the existence of what you call soul or spirit, what we call ISB. You will start saying, well, what is the physics of an ISB? And then you will say, okay, once you discover the physics of an ISB, then you can say, well, all right, then how do you dismantle these death traps? Now, these death traps were installed zillions of years ago, and they've been installed all throughout the galaxy. They're not in the good ET areas, but in the bad ET areas, it's rampant. They are really well done. Even the good ETs have difficulty disassembling them, both locating them and disassembling them. It's really high quality tech. However,
Are they going to tell us about these death traps? Are they going to tell us the truth about these death traps? As an example, the good
well,
ET.
actually, they had us discover the death traps with our own projects at Farsight. They didn't just talk to us about this. They encouraged us to do investigations, and sure enough, we discovered it. And then it became sort of a common topic of discussion that we talked about with them. But they didn't say, okay, I'm going to tell you about the death traps. They allowed us to discover it, to become owners of that information, and then as equals to be able to talk with them about it. But one thing I can tell you is that the prison population on Earth has a sufficient number of incredible galactic level geniuses that if the disclosure thing does happen and this whole thing comes out, we can then marshal the resources of some of the galaxy's best minds to both be able to locate and dismantle the death traps. We've already done some projects on Farsight that we've actually recently published. So we show you where some of the command centers are. They're underground, they're on Earth and underground, but we know actually like where they're located. So, and there's these because these things, these death traps, it's tech, so it has to be maintained. The death traps is not something that just exists forever without maintenance. They have to be maintained. So we could then have the best human minds on the planet, on the galaxy, working on this problem. And also the issue of getting your memories back once you've been zapped by the death traps a zillion times. How do you get back the memories? That's actually a work in progress. It theoretically can be done, but it's not easy. And that's something the best minds in the galaxy have to start working on as well. How do you bring back all the memories that the ISB lost when it went through the death traps? That's an issue.
I'm going back to my question about how much you've learned directly from knowledge from the ETs versus how much you've put together through bits and scraps of information. And if they're not willing to tell you the truth, which is what you're saying in the future.
No, they've never lied to me. But
hang on, let me just finish my thought. So if they're not willing to tell you the truth about the nature of reality, then I have to think that all of this reality that you're describing here has been created through little bits and scraps of anecdotal information that you've gathered from things that you've remote viewed, as opposed to them giving you specific truth and to giving you specific information about the true nature of reality. Like if they're not willing to tell us how quantum mechanics works, if they're not willing to tell us, and that's science, that's a fact, like it's a truth, it's a hard truth. So if they're just going to sit there and say, you guys go figure it out, I'm not willing to tell you that, it's got to be the same mentality that they have towards you. And so the information that they've given to you has to be very minimal. It's like a you go figure it out kind of an attitude. And
there's two things you have to understand. First of all, I cannot speak for them. I can speak only for myself. I am not the official mouthpiece of them. So if you have this question about what they are willing to tell you and what they're not, you have to talk to them about that. And that's something beyond my beyond my pay grade. You're also flipping the issue entirely in terms of anecdotal pieces from our own projects. 98% of everything we get is from our own projects. And it's self-discovery under controlled conditions where we know how the data were collected and we know it's correct because we collected it under totally blind conditions with highly trained remote viewers where there was no leakage of information. So we know our data, all 150 plus projects we have on farsightprime.com, that's nothing we have to get verified or be told that is true or not. That's the information we as equals to the ETs go in knowing. So that's that and they were adamant about that. They did not want, the whole planet is manipulated because people depend on other people telling them things. You have to stop that whole cycle because authorities come in and say, we know, And so so what you're saying is, let the good ETs be the new authorities that will finally tell us the truth. It doesn't work that way. As soon as you rely on somebody else, you're walking down the path of manipulation and control. However, the good ETs do want the information to come out, but they're not going to say they're going to do all the work for you, but they will help you do it. They will give you any resource that you need. If you want to know the truth, they will make sure you have all the resources to know that truth. And they're not going to stop you from asking them information, asking them questions, but they're very careful about, from my own past experience, they're very careful about not letting you get dependent on them so that you don't do your own work. They're very careful about saying, we don't want to be the pastor that has 1 million followers. We want you to be equal to us.
But you're talking about specifically restarting the educational system for the planet Earth.
And that basically means restarting the process of allowing free thought within the academy. That is not happening right now. You do not have free thought within the universities. You have to be able to ask questions without being censored, and without not being able to get tenure, without not being able to get promoted. You have to be able to not be punished because you ask certain questions. In archaeology, if you ask certain questions like these artifacts that we're digging up at a certain level, this indicates very high advanced life forms, and it shouldn't be possible. If you ask those questions, A, you can't get a job in archaeology. You can't do anything in archaeology. People like Graham Hancock are real pioneers because they ask questions that other people just, refuse to ask, let alone answer. And so
I agree. It's a broken system today.
It's a broken system.
The educational system is broken today, but it's going to continue to be broken if the reinvention of the educational system isn't based on truth.
It has to be based on in my opinion, it has to be based on the allowance of asking questions and not censoring.
There's not a fundamental base of knowledge that we should be.
Oh, there is, but there's no reason why we can't solve that issue in just a few years.
We clearly can't. We clearly can't come to agreement on anything scientifically.
If we can come to an agreement on allowing thought to be freely questioned, then you'd be amazed at how quickly things can be done. Right now, you can't get advancement in all types of disciplines: psychology, anthropology, archaeology, all the social sciences. You can't get agreement because they're not allowing questions to be answered.
I agree. Yeah, it's a disaster right now.
I mean, they're not allowing questions to be asked, let alone to be answered. You can't even raise the issue of a non-physical being at the core of every human, and that being, the so-called Isby soul spirit, is animating the physical body. You can't even raise that in psychology.
So yeah, I mean, truth is important, right? I mean, getting to the truth and understanding the truth of the nature of reality seems to be a critical component for us to be able to advance as a species, as a life form. If we're basing our reality on beliefs, then we're destined for
manipulation and control.
All of that. Yeah. Yeah. And so on a restart, I guess I'm just very passionate about the truth and about finding the truth and about establishing some sort of truth about what we know. And if we're saying that, yeah, we'll just start everything over, and all these ETs actually do know how quantum mechanics work. They actually do know what the true history of the Earth is. They actually do know, all of these mysteries and secrets of life and of the universe, but we're not really going to worry about that. We're just going to argue and debate for the next 4,000 years.
Farsight's Prime whole library was designed to answer exactly those questions, but it was hard to build it, really hard to build it. And we had to use a methodology that was currently normal for the galaxy, but it's very abnormal for here on Earth. Because part of the thing is they didn't want us to rely on just he said, she said, and they didn't want us to rely on just physical types of stuff that could be manipulated or suppressed. So they wanted us to use that particular methodology, remote viewing, to make these discoveries, but to make it as scientific as possible. So they do want these answers to come out. And on farsightprime.com is 95% of everything you just asked for in terms of the history of the planet. It's been done. And it's not been done by having one ET group come in and say, believe us, don't believe them. It was done indigenously by human beings raised in this system. And we did it, and we collected it, and we know it's correct because of the way we did it, and we verify it to you on video so you can see us doing it.
So don't try. So different ET groups have different versions of the truth.
No, the bad ETs high up, they know exactly what they're lying about.
So they're lying.
They're openly lying.
Yeah.
And they're manipulating. To them, the truth is nothing special. The goal of the society is special. The vision of the leadership, that's special. And anything you have to do to trick, lie to, or manipulate the ISBs that are in your slave force is perfectly okay. Truth has nothing to have value for.
Well, luckily they won't be there during this rebuild and this reestablishment of education. It'll be the good ETs that'll be there. But unfortunately, it sounds like we're not going to be able to use any of the truth as we get this thing restarted.
Well, you're asking for a Bible. You're asking for...
Oh, God, no.
No. You're asking for some type of solid
not a belief
publication
system
of what is the truth. And I'm telling you that the farsightprime.com library is the closest you're going to get now to in terms of the history of what's going on, and also the ISBI reality. But the other questions that you have are tremendously valuable and real, and that's exactly the types of questions that you're asking right now that needs to be debated in the academy, and it's not. And the very question that you're asking right now, why don't they simply tell us? That needs to be asked and debated at the highest levels of decibels, shouted in the academy. But the academy is not even asking if the ETs exist.
Which academy?
The academy means all of academia.
Right.
When you say the academy, you're talking about all university and college systems. You can't even have that. There's not even a single, there's no classes about the UFO phenomena. There are congressional hearings about the UAP phenomenon. It's not a dispute. They don't have congressional hearings about things that don't exist. There are congressional hearings about this. You have academics such as David Jacobs and John Mack who have written about that side of things. There's no university courses that cover this material anywhere. You can't get it. And what they would do is say, if you propose to teach a course like this, they'd say, well, you have to have the appropriate literature and the coursework and the textbooks that would be associated with it. So you have to have those first. Those don't exist. So you have to be able to use literature that is not accepted within the traditional academic settings, such as John Mack's or David M. Jacobs, or even my own work. I have a science book on remote viewing, the science and theory of non-physical perception. And, you know, even that, it's a science book. That's a good example. That went under peer review for 5 years at the University Press of Kansas. Sorry. And it went, and the editor at the time was great. He was encouraging, and it went from its original size to twice its size as I was addressing every single complaint that the various people were saying. But it was finally rejected after 5 years. They just gave up because they couldn't get some academics, I won't mention names, but they wouldn't get one particular academic to sign off on it, even though I did everything that she said. And the person didn't even want me to use the word science in the title. I mean, talk about, but the basic issue is it went through a 5-year review process. I did absolutely everything. It grew twice the size. It became a great book. And finally, it was like, we don't think we can get this through the committee without a complete universal, all reviewers saying this is the best thing since sliced bread. And we also live within a Republican conservative legislative environment. We don't want to have our budget attacked or anything like that by conservative legislators. So we ended up publishing the book at Farsight Press. We published it ourselves. But the book is stellar because it went through a 5-year peer review process with academics. And by the way, some of the reviews were right off the charts great. We had reviewers come in that said this was amazing, and they wanted. So there was always one. It always boiled down to one reviewer that was saying no, but that but that happened continuously, no matter how many revisions it went through. So, but the result was the book improved tremendously. So the issue is that a lot of the questions that the Academy does not allow to even be raised is an example in that book. The book needed to be published not not to say this is the codification of truth. It needed to be published because it was raising ideas that the Academy needed to think about. And the Academy didn't want it to think about that. That's the problem. But the book itself is spectacular because of the 5-year review process. And the editor is golden that he let it go through that long process and stayed with it to the end. And it was regrettable at the very end that it couldn't be published through the University Press of Kansas. But it was great that it didn't, because if it was published through the University Press of Kansas, it would have been expensive and it would have been a very short press run, and then it would have been out of print. But now that it was published by Farsight Press, it's available, it's still available, and it's a bestseller. So it turned out to be and it's inexpensive. It's turned out to be for the best.
Nice, nice. Well, good. Yeah, it's been an amazing conversation. Definitely opened my eyes up to a lot of new possibilities. You know, I think once we get close to that 4-hour time period on my podcast, it gets a little daunting for people to think about, you know, sitting through a 4 hour. So we ought to wrap it up. But just, you know, of course, really appreciate you coming on your show and sharing your knowledge, and people should definitely check out Farsight and you know, look at some of the videos that you have put out there on remote viewing and some of the projects that you've done, and some of the and your website as well. But the YouTube channel has a lot of free content.
There's also my Instagram, which is Courtney Brown Farsight, all one word, no spaces, Courtney Brown Farsight, where we have lots of examples of video photography of cloaked UFO ships, because we were one of the ones that pioneered how to do that.
Right, right. Yeah, and there's a description of the cameras that are needed on your website.
On farsight.org, there's a description of the type of camera equipment and how to use it and all the settings to video record on demand in the middle of the day cloaked UFO ships.
Right.
Now, these are not the ships that are showing up by the good ETs that people are calling drones. Those ships are purposely being visible so anybody with any cell phone camera can take a picture of it. But if you want to see ships that the bad ETs don't want you to see, you have to evade their cloaking technology, and that means you have to shoot in infrared and super high speed rates and frame rates, and we show you exactly how to do that.
Nice. Yeah, I want Ryan to check that out for sure, so that we can attempt to capture some footage around here and see what we can find.
And you can see some examples on that on the Instagram page for free, just by going Courtney Brown Farsight.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's really, really, really cool stuff on the Instagram page. I mean, it's stuff zooming by at, what, 20,000 miles per hour?
Well, typically these UFOs, as part of their cloaking method, is they typically fly at 20,000 miles an hour, and that's 32,000 kilometers per hour. And we don't do the estimations for that. The estimations for speeds that were done by Lincoln Lounsbury, who is the guy who told us the methods for how to do this. A lot of times we do things that are amazingly innovative, but we didn't think of it originally. And Lincoln Lounsbury was the one who told us the exact cameras to use, the exact settings to use, the place to send the cameras to get them converted to infrared, the whole 9 yards. So give him credit for it. But he was the senior lead air traffic control person at the Washington, D.C. airport, the big one. And he had lots of examples that he was showing us, Excel spreadsheets, video examples of his own stuff. So when he convinced us that it was the right way to do it, we duplicated his methods exactly, and then we published exactly how to do that. And so that was how we got that. And nice. He's the one who estimates the speeds for us, because that's not our expertise, but that's what he does.
Excellent. No, I really appreciate your time. Any final thoughts to close out on before?
Yeah, I want to say something to you. This is a very great podcast, a very interesting and new approach to podcasting, and you handle it in a very technical and open-minded way that doesn't have any type of automatic censoring or condemning or limitations in the types of thoughts that you allow. It is truly the Limitless Matt Beall podcast. So I want to congratulate you on what you've done. You've taken significant resources in doing this. I know you're heavy onto Spotify as well as YouTube, as well as other venues. And you really, a lot of people just have their companies and do their stuff and retire and say it's a good day, and you start it all over again, are out to change the world by just bringing new information in a respectable format, and you're doing it really well. And I just want to say my hat's off to you.
Very kind of you. Thank you. No, I appreciate that very much. It's kind of a big risk, but it's kind of similar to what you're doing, and I mean, you're in the mainstream academic community, but then on the side, you're exploring something that could be, one of the most important, if not the most important thing that human beings have ever been involved in. So much respect to you and what you're doing as well.
Thanks.
Yes, sir. Good stuff. I enjoyed it. Great conversation. Great.